Chapter 147. The world around him was silent, but it was like turned into a giant invisible wall, coldly squeezing him in the middle. Shah Danon slowly felt he could not breathe, but he still did not speak. Perhaps even he himself did not know what he was holding on for. Bang! A loud sound. Everyone was surprised. Shah Danon raised his head and saw Master Doyle Shun slammed the fire stick on the tea table. He stood up, frowned. Apparently he was really angry, shouted, "Bastard, don't think that if you don't speak, I can't do anything to you." Shah Danon's body shook. His face was very complicated, but he did not speak. Doyle Shun was even angrier, laughed. Good, you bastard, today I will let you dash. Faction head, calm down." Suddenly, a shout came from the Jadian disciples. Immediately, there was a commotion in the Jadian disciples. Everyone turned pale. Master Doyle Shun had been guarding Jadian for 100 years. No one dared to challenge his power. But today someone dared to stop him. Even Shah Danon turned to look. In the uproar, Anan walked out from the crowd, walked to the middle, stood next to Shah Danon, and kneeled down. Master Doyle Shun was surprised. Master Shui Yu was also surprised. She stood up, said hurriedly, "Chier, you are crazy, come back." Anan's face was a little pale, but her body kneeling next to Shah Danon did not have any intention of backing off. On that unparalleled, beautiful face, her white teeth bit her lower lip, quietly said, "Faction head Sherbois, Bamboo Height disciple Anan have something to say." Shui Yu frowned, shouted, "Chier, Shah Danon is Bamboo Height disciple. He committed a serious crime. Faction head will decide. Don't talk, come back." Anan's mouth twitched. Shah Danon, who was next to her, could clearly hear her heavy breathing. Obviously, in front of everyone, kneeling next to him, the pressure was not small. But in this solemn hall, in everyone's strange eyes, this beautiful girl still did not back off. The mountain breeze outside the crystal hall, without knowing when, blew in. A few strands of her hair fluttered in the wind. Shah Danon stared at the girl next to him, did not speak. "Martial Uncle Sect Leader, please allow me to say a few words." Reverend Doyle Shun looked around, saw the Taoist friends from other sects were all looking at him. He could only coldly said, "Fine, speak." Lu Sweki nodded. "Thank you, Sect Leader. Head Sherbois, fellow Sherbois and Sher Shu, I do not have a close relationship with Shah Danon and Zhang Shidi. But after 7 Peaks tournament, I went down a mountain with him. At Kongsang Mountain's Cave of Fangs and EC's Billows Hill, I saw Zhang Shidi fight with the Falcon. He is not a spy. Now that there are outsiders here, Junior Martial Brother Zhang may have something that is difficult to say. Sect Leader Martial Uncle, please think thrice before you act. You must not. Wait." Suddenly, a voice interrupted Lu Sweki. Everyone looked. It was the old man from Incense Valley whose surname is Shangwan. Shah Danon's attention was focused on the 2 Sky Song monks, did not pay attention to him. Now, his face was thin, his body was quite thin, even his words were a bit sharp. "The outsiders this lady is talking about is most likely me, and also Pu Hong, Pu Kong, and other friends? Jadian had such a thing happen, and you still call yourselves the world's orthodox. Don't tell me you don't even want us to see an explanation?" Reverend Daoxian and the other branch's head elders' faces immediately turned ugly. Taoist Song Song, who was sitting beside, coldly said, "Shangwan's brother, today since our sect head has decided to publicly interrogate this person in front of all of you, it is to give all of you an explanation." Shangwan So laughed coldly, said darkly, "Master Vaskalo, your Jadian's disciple Shah Danon's body. There are too many secrets. Other than possessing Falcon's evil object, he also knows Sky Song Temple's secret method, and most likely it is also related to our Incense Valley's divine weapon, Inferno Mirror." Then he paused, turned to Master Doyle Shun, said, "I will say this first. Inferno Mirror is our Incense Valley's treasure. We must get it back." The more Tian Bui heard, the angrier he got, sneered and said, "Shangwan fellow brother, since this treasure is so important, why didn't your Funxiang Valley take good care of it and casually throw it away? Actually connected to my disciple. That means I'm afraid the person guarding the treasure is also trash." Shangwan Su was furious, abruptly stood up, Tian Bui did not show any weakness. Also stood up. The atmosphere suddenly tensed up to a point of mutual hostility. Doyle Shun shouted, "Tian Shitty, what you doing? Sit down." Tian Bui stared fiercely at Shangwan Su, but in the end did not dare to defy sect head in public, and could only slowly sit down. Daoxian turned and spoke to Shangwan Su. "Shangwan Tao's brother, we will naturally give you an explanation, don't worry." Shangwan Su sneered, also sat back down. Shui Yu said angrily, "Cheer, why are you still not coming back?" Unexpectedly, Lu Sweki, who used to listen to her teacher's every word, was like a different person today, raised her head and said to Daoxian, sect head teacher uncle, "No matter what mistake Zhang Jr. brother has committed, please sect head teacher uncle investigate carefully, but he is definitely not a spy who infiltrated our Qing Yun sect." She looked forward, her face calm, like she was not afraid of the whole world, said decisively, "Disciple Anan is willing to use her life as a guarantee." Everyone was stunned for a moment. Even Shaw Danan himself slightly opened his mouth, staring at the girl kneeling next to him. On the snow-white skin, within the frosty face, suddenly there seemed to be a hint of gentleness. Disciple Bei is also willing to use his life as a guarantee for Shaw Danan. Almost at the same time, when Lu Sweki finished speaking, Bei seemed to be unable to bear it any longer, resolutely rushed out, knelt in the great hall, did not even look at his teacher Taoist Song Song's face, which immediately turned into pig liver, as if throwing caution to the wind, loudly said, "Zhang Jr. brother risked his life for Qing Yun. He will definitely not be an outside sect spy. Disciple grew up with him. I know even more that there is no such thing. Sect head teacher uncle. Please reconsider." Master Doyleshan's face was as bad as it could be. But at this moment, it seemed like he was stimulated by something. There was a commotion among Jadian disciples. After a moment, Peak of Wind disciples, Dragonhead Peak disciples, and Bamboo Peak disciples all ran out, kneeled down, loudly said, "Disciple is also willing to use my life as a guarantee for Zhang Shidi." Everyone turned pale and looked. These three people were Zhang Shu, Keheo, and Tianlinger. Right now, other than Tian Bui and his wife, Longsho Valley head Taoist Song Song and Return of the Wind Valley head Zheng Shuchong both stood up at the same time, extremely shocked. At this moment, the hall was in chaos. Master Doyle Shun's heart was filled with anger, thinking these disobedient disciples are going to rebel today. But at this moment, many of the righteous were here. He could not do anything. He, as the head of Jadian, had lost all his face. The anger rushed to his chest, but he did not know what to do. At this moment, suddenly someone behind him coughed lightly. It was his disciple Xiao Yikai. He said softly, "Master, shouldn't you go back and take a rest, then come back later?" Master Doyle Shun immediately realized, snorted heavily, slammed the table. Immediately, the Jadian disciples quieted down, looked at him. Master Doyle Shun did not make a sound, strode into the inner hall. Everyone looked at each other. Only Xiao Yikai smiled and stood out, said to the crowd, "There was an urgent matter at the back of the mountain just now, urgently waiting for my master to handle. Will everyone please wait for a moment?" Shangwansu's face was full of ridicule, said, "Xiao nephew, I have long heard that your Jadian sect's rules are very strict. Seeing it today, it is really extraordinary." Xiao Yikai's eyes flashed with anger, but immediately smiled and said, "Senior must be joking." After speaking, he turned around, coughed softly, walked to Master Vaskalo and the rest of the branch heads, quietly said, "Various teacher uncles, still not calling them up?" Sung Shu Chong and the rest reacted, immediately went up to call back their disciples, pulled them aside, and scolded them harshly. Hidi was pulled back by Suru, but was not scolded. Instead, she was full of grievance, tears in her eyes. She called out, "Mother!" Suru heaved a long sigh, shook her head, signaling her not to say any more. Tianlinger looked at Tian Bui, only to see Tian Bai's face was ashen, brows knitted tightly, did not say a word, sat on the chair. Anan was forcefully pulled out of Crystal Hall by her senior sister Wenmin. The surrounding people's gazes were filled with strange looks, until they walked to a secluded corner outside Crystal Hall. When Min quietly grumbled, Anan instead lowered her head and did not make sound. After a while, Shuewa Master unhurriedly walked over. Wen Min, after all, loved her junior sister, went up and quietly spoke to Shuewa. Tried her best to explain, but Shuewa's face was grave, walked straight to Anan. Anan did not dare to look at her, lowered her head, softly called out, "Teacher." Shuewa stared at her. This disciple whom she was most proud of, and also the most beautiful, did not speak for a long while, and then suddenly sighed. Her voice was rather helpless, as if carrying a faint bitterness. Wen Min and Anan were both shocked. Shuewa moved her eyes away from Anan, walked to the railing outside of Crystal Hall, looked out, saw the mountain peak reaching into the sky, white clouds floating, an awe-inspiring celestial atmosphere. "Chier, you did something wrong today, do you know that?" Anan lowered her head, softly said, "Yes, teacher, I made it difficult for you. It is disciple's fault. But that Sha Danan, he really will not." Shuewa suddenly turned back, stared at her, said, "Why would you use your life to guarantee for him?" Anan's face immediately turned pale, unable to say a word. Shuewa looked at her for a while, shook her head and sighed. "Sin." Anan said quietly, "Teacher, I am not." Shuewa suddenly cut her off. "Do you know when I said you did something wrong? It is not because you put me in a difficult position." Anan and Wen Min were surprised. Wen Min surprised, "Teacher, what did you say?" Shuewa smiled bitterly. Her eyes looked into the distance again, like she also fell into a distant memory. "You young people don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Showing off a moment of bravery, I am afraid it will push that Sha Danan to the road to death." Anan's face paled, said, "Teacher." Shuewa's voice became lower, like she saw the deeply buried past in her memory. "It has been so many years, in a blink of an eye. Almost 100 years have passed. At that time, there was also a person like him, made a big mistake, but we begged for mercy for him, but in the end still." She slowly turned back, met Anan and Wen Min's eyes, softly said, "That person's situation at that time, although it is not the same as Sha Danan today, but the situation is very similar. But that person is the person your head Shuewa hates the most." Shuewa said in a low voice, even with a trace of pain. For the first time in her life, she showed a sad face in front of her disciple. Chapter 148. In the hall, Master Doyle Shun had not returned yet, but among the people, whispers could be heard. When Shui Yu and her disciples returned, they saw the people were separated into two sides, but Sha Danan was still kneeling on the ground alone. Anan seemed to hesitate, but after Shui Yu's stern eyes swept across, she quietly walked behind her and stood there. After a moment, Master Doyle Shun slowly walked out from the back hall, returned to his seat. The hall immediately became quiet. Master Doyle Shun did not immediately ask Sha Danan. Instead, he was apologetic, said to Puhong Holy Monk, "Puhong Shi Xiang, my faction's disciple is rude. Let Shi Xiang see a joke." Puhong smiled, put his palms together. "Doyle Shun Shi Xiang, what are you talking about?" At this moment, Master Vas Kalo came, his hand holding Sha Danan's fire stick, put it on the tea table next to Master Doyle Shun. Doyle Shun frowned, looked at him, his eyes were slightly puzzled. Master Vas Kalo said quietly, "Shi Xiang, after you left, the situation was a bit chaotic. This thing is very important, just in case I put it away, and now put it back here." Doyle Shun nodded, said, "Shitty is considerate." Master Vas Kalo retreated. Master Doyle Shun's eyes once again returned to Sha Danan. Everyone became nervous. They knew the next moment is the moment that will decide this young man's fate. "Sha Danan, I will ask you one last time. Do you have anything to say?" On Sha Danan's forehead, beads of sweat appeared. The situation now was extremely bad, but he had been in Jadian for many years, knew the taboo of the righteous against spying on their secret transmission method. If he really said it, it is unknown what will happen to him, but Posey, who had been buried for many years, most likely not only his reputation will be damaged, even the burial place of his bones will be moved out from Sky Song Temple's Tower of Rebirth. Moreover, Posey is one of Skysong Temple's 4 divine monks. Whether people will believe him or not is a problem. His heart was fighting. One moment he thought of Posey's voice. The next moment he thought of his faction's deep kindness. But to ask him to betray Posey is like forcing him to die. In a short period of time, he could not think clearly. However, no one in the hall would give him the time to do so. Doyen looked at Shah Danan's face after hearing his question, although there were beads of sweat on his forehead, but he did not say a word. Then he remembered the scene when the disciples begged for mercy for him. Deep inside his heart, there was a fire that had been dormant for many years, ignited. As if 100 years ago, that white figure also knelt like this in the crystal hall, in front of the 3 Qing statues, in front of the teachers and elders. Even in the midst of his fellow sect disciples pleading for him, he was still that arrogant, that insufferably arrogant, looking down on the world. Shui Yu, who was sitting at the back, looked at Reverend Daoxian's expression from afar. Her body shook. A trace of sorrow flashed past her eyes. She slowly lowered her head. Bang! A loud sound rang out, and everyone was shocked. Master Doyle Shun seemed to have finally lost his patience, suddenly stood up, pointed at Shah Danan, and said angrily, "Evil spawn, that year I saw your pitiful life, so I took you in Jadian, but unexpectedly it was like nurturing a tiger." Shah Danan's body shook, raised his head, opened his mouth, seemed to want to say something. But Master Doyle Shun's face was like ice, said coldly, "Today, if we do not get rid of you, evil spawn, how can our Jadian explain to the world's righteous? Never mind. Let me fulfill your wish." Everyone turned pale. Tianbui abruptly stood up. Lu Sueki, Tian Linger, Lin Jingyu, and the rest all turned pale. Even Tian In Temple Puhong holy monk, who was sitting beside, also seemed to be unable to bear it. Quietly said to Daoxian, "Daoxian, senior brother, should we reconsider?" Daoxian snorted coldly, said, "This evil creature possesses the evil sect's evil object, and also violated our good faction's great taboo. His sins are grave." While speaking, he casually picked up the fire stick on the tea table, said, "Today I will let you die under this evil sect, evil object." Shah Danan's mind buzzed, went blank. Everything in front of him seemed to have lost its color. He could only see Doyle Shun raise his arm. Master Tan Beli's face was green, about to say something, and the Jadian disciples around him were in chaos. In the main hall, blood was about to spill 5 steps away. Ah! Suddenly, a loud shout shocked everyone present. Everyone's faces paled. In the shock, Master Doyle Shun's body was shaking. He roared and threw away the fire stick like it was scalded. The fire stick drew a black shadow in the air, fell on the ground, bounced a few times, and rolled in front of Shah Danan. It was also at this moment that everyone saw a black shadow fly up from the fire stick. After a moment, it stopped in midair and made a strange, squeaking sound. It was a palm-sized centipede with gorgeous colors. Its tail actually had 7 forks, and as it flew, it shook its head and wagged its tail. Its appearance was extremely arrogant. Shah Danan was stunned. His whole body suddenly began to tremble. His eyes stared at the monster in midair, the thing that was deeply imprinted in his memory. 7 tails centipede. Time, in that instant, as if flowing backwards, the surging and roaring torrent, brought him back to that dark night many years ago, that bloody night when Pu Ji and the mysterious black-clothed man dueled. And at the same time, he lost everything. His whole body began to tremble. The boundless smell of blood rose in his heart, surrounded him. He stretched out his hand, grabbed the fire stick tightly in his hand. But at this moment, no one noticed Shah Danan's strangeness. Everyone's eyes and attention were on Master Doyle Shun. The Qin Yun sect elders, their knowledge and experience were not comparable to ordinary people. In a blink, they surrounded Reverend Daoxian, especially separated him from that 7-tailed centipede. When everyone looked at Reverend Daoxian, they couldn't help but turn pale. Reverend Daoxian's right hand was trembling. There was a wound on his middle finger. Obviously, it was injured by that 7-tailed centipede. And at this moment, the blood that flowed out was already black. And what was even worse was from the wound on his finger, a ghastly black air with almost visible speed attacked upwards. The seven-tailed centipede was known as the world's most venomous. Even Master Doyle Shun, such an accomplished person, was also trapped by it. Reverend Daoxian for a moment felt dizzy, unbearable stuffiness, but his skills were so high, even better than Puji Monk at that time. Immediately forced himself to calm down, his left hand's fingers like a knife, pointed several times at his right hand, which was almost numb, drawing in the air. Immediately that stream of black energy was blocked and slowed down. At this moment, Master Vaskalo rushed to his side, held his body tightly, saw Master Doyle Shun's wound, turned to Shah Danon and shouted, "Shah Danon, you bastard, you dare to harm the head?" Everyone was shocked. Shah Danon said, "No, not me." Reverend Daoxian, who was being escorted by the crowd, right now looked slightly better, but the seven-tailed centipede was extremely venomous. Even on his face, black air could be seen indistinctly, thin and did not disperse. But even so, his consciousness was still clear. After taking a deep breath, he said, "Quickly capture this evil creature and interrogate him properly." Master Vaskalo turned his head, said, "Shixiang, don't worry, I am here." Master Doyle Shun breathed heavily, but half of his heart was relieved, nodded, looked at him, was about to sit in. His voice suddenly stopped. Master Vaskalo's face in front of him suddenly changed from anxious expression to ferocious. And almost at the same time, Master Doyle Shun felt a chill in his abdomen. Instantly a sharp pain came, his body shook. The essence that was originally moving to his right hand to suppress the poison suddenly disappeared. "Ah!" Master Doyle Shun roared, his left hand cut down. Master Vaskalo's left hand immediately met. The two clashed. Master Vaskalo's body shook, flew out, landed in front of Crystal Hall's door. After a moment, blood slowly came out from the corner of his mouth, but his face was still sneering. On his right hand, there was a short sword, crystal clear like water. It was obviously not an ordinary item. And on the sword, there were many blood marks, bright red blood, slowly dripped from the blade, drop by drop, onto the green bricks of the hall. The crowd, which was in chaos just a moment ago, suddenly quieted down. It was a deathly silence. Reverend Daoxian's dark green Taoist robe, in a blink at his abdomen area, had already turned dark, his entire face also immediately extremely pale, just that the shock on his face right now far surpassed the pain in his body. What are you doing?" His hoarse voice, facing Master Vaskalo, who was standing at the entrance of the hall, asked everyone's question. Right now, even the Dragon Head Valley disciples Kaheo, Lin Jingyu, etc., almost could not believe their own eyes, opened their mouths, looking at that person who was once one of the most powerful people on Qinyan Hill. "Me?" Master Vaskalo, as if suddenly changed into another person, laughed out savagely. "I am plotting against you. Can't you tell?" Speaking, he waved his hand. The seven-tailed centipede in the air immediately flew towards him. In a blink disappeared into his sleeve. Kaheo finally could not bear it. His voice filled with confusion and shock, loudly shouted, "Teacher, are you crazy?" Master Vaskalo glanced at him, and then his eyes landed on Lin Jingyu, who was standing beside Kaheo, but had the same expression as him, and many more Dragon Head Valley disciples. Even the other Qing Yun sect disciples all looked at him like they were looking at a madman in disbelief. Chapter 149. "Ha ha ha, crazy, yes, I have long been crazy." Taoist Song laughed to the sky. His demeanor also seemed to carry a trace of madness. Early 100 years ago, also in this crystal hall, after I saw Wan Jianni Senior Brothers ending, I have already gone crazy. Teacher, Long Shou Valley Kaheo and Bei right now both had sobs in their voices, but behind them, surrounding Reverend Doyle Shun, the Qing Yun sect elders, their bodies suddenly stiffened. Wan Jianni, this name that seemed to carry a nightmare, with a thick shadow, pressed down on Qing Yun sect sky. Reverend Doyle Shun's eyes twitched. This name that no one dared to mention in front of him for 100 years seemed to deeply agitate him. Xiao Yikai supported his body, but suddenly realized Reverend Doyle Shun's injured body suddenly shook violently. Even through that layer of clothes, he could also feel that the flame that suddenly burned in his teacher's body was actually so scorching. Taoist Song Song stood there with a crazed demeanor, as if the resentment that had accumulated in his heart for so many years finally vented out. For a moment, no one stepped forward to capture this murderer who injured Qing Yun's sect head. He pointed at Reverend Doyle Shun, and then pointed at the back of the crowd. The three Qing statues in the shadows loudly said, "You, all of you." He pointed at Tian Bui, Shuiwe, Zhang Shuchang, Shang Zhiyang, etc. Qing Yun heads. All of you speak with your conscience. This sect head position, who should sit on it? Is it one's senior brother? Or him? No one answered. The young disciples were at a loss, but Tian Bui and the rest were livid, not making a sound. In the great hall, only Taoist Song Song's crazed voice reverberated. "Why, all of you are not speaking. Are you feeling guilty? Ha ha ha. Yes, yes. Actually, who doesn't know what should be in their hearts? But now, who is sitting on this position?" Shuiwe's face was pale. Looking at Song Song, who was totally different from usual, slowly said, "Song Song's senior brother, the matter has already passed for more than 100 years. Why are you still so persistent?" "Hey!" Taoist Vaskalo at this moment seemed to completely disregard his own identity, fiercely spat, with a disdainful look on his face, coldly laughed, and said, "100 over years? Yes, I have endured for more than 100 years, and only today do I have the opportunity to redress senior brother one's grievances. Back then, when we were in the Verdant Cloud sect in the Wildlands, you. His finger pointed one by one, even pointed at Tian Bui. Zheng Shuchang, Shang Zhengliang, sneered and said, "You all these 100 years, being the head of the table has been comfortable. Do you still remember when one's senior brother risked everything to save our lives? Do you still remember who was the one who generously shared his cultivation insights with us, allowing us to make great progress in our cultivation? And you," he suddenly pointed to Shui Yu and said coldly, "You actually said that I'm so stubborn just now. Back then, who didn't know that you secretly loved Wan Shi Xiao, and later he saved you and loved you? Who would have thought that you did not save him that day? And today you even came to mock me." Shui Yu's face turned deathly pale. "And you, Tian Bui," as if he wanted to vent out all the resentment and anger in his heart. Taoist Song Song laughed wildly and pointed at Tian Bui, loudly said, "You say it yourself. How did one's senior brother treat you? And how did you repay him?" Tian Bai's face was ashen, both of his hands tightly clenched into fists. His wife Su Ru, who was standing beside him, her face was also equally pale. But both of them did not say a word, allowed Taoist Song Song to laugh wildly and criticize them. "You were only an ordinary wood puppet disciple in Big Bamboo Valley. Even your teacher and senior brothers looked down on you. But after one senior brother met you, he recognized that you were a talent with great potential. From then on, he devoted all his efforts to nurture you. Not only did he share his cultivation insights, he even strongly recommended you to join the Wildlands 5. From then on, you were able to ascend to Qing Yun's sect's influential figure. Then you could sit on this position today. Am I right?" Tianbi breathed deeply, his expression mixed with some pain. After a long while, he slowly said, "One senior brother treated me with great kindness. Even if my body is crushed and my bones crushed, it will still be difficult to repay." Once he said that, not only the Big Bamboo Valley disciples, even the other branches including Tian Yin Temple, Funxiang Valley people who were shocked at Qing Yun's internal strife, all changed their expressions. Obviously, even Tian Bui also admitted it. It could be seen that the one senior brother mentioned by Taoist Song Song really had a hidden story. Taoist Song Song laughed coldly, said, Good, you finally admitted it. At least you still have a little conscience. Then how did you repay him? Say it." Tian Bui slowly lowered his head, clenched his teeth tightly, as if his body was also trembling slightly. Taoist Song Song laughed wildly and said, "Fine, you don't want to say, I will say it for you. You shameless person, a waste of one's senior brother to think so highly of you. That day after returning to Qingyan Hill, you clearly knew one's senior brother like Small Bamboo Valley's Suru Su junior sister, yet you snatched his love away. Is there such thing?" Tianbi abruptly raised his head, but once he met Taoist Song Song's almost crazy gaze, That scorching flame also seemed to be burning in it. For some reason, he felt that in the unseen world, there seemed to be a white figure standing behind Taoist Song Song. He immediately could not speak, and slowly lowered his head again. Just that he did not speak, Suru, who was beside him, suddenly stepped forward, loudly said, "Song Song, senior brother, if you have any problems, then come at me." At that time, one's senior brother indeed had feelings for me. But from the beginning to the end, I only had respect and adoration for him. His kindness to us husband and wife is as heavy as a mountain, but me and Bowie being on good terms, it was all my own intention, is not considered snatching his love away. And at that time, Juan's senior brother himself, also in front of the two of us, personally blessed the two of us. Taoist Song Song sneer said, "Juan's senior brother's character is so proud, after being betrayed by the two of you. How can he be like a common person, pester you endlessly? He would rather be grieved himself than to let others see it." Speaking till here, he seemed unwilling to continue, stared at Reverend Daoxian, who was injured and panting, his eyes revealing endless hatred, said, "At that time when senior brother treated me like a brother, like a father, single-handedly groomed me. In the wildlands he even risked his life to save me. This life of mine has long been given to him. Hateful 100 years ago, I tried my best and still could not save him. Since then, I told myself, no matter what, I must avenge him." Speaking till the last few words, he shouted himself hoarse, as if to his own heart, and also as if to that pair of eyes in the unseen world. Xiao Ikai's face turned pale, but what made him even more surprised was that the body that he was supporting suddenly pushed him away. Qingyun's sect head reverend, the supreme leader of the world's good faction for 100 years, Reverend Daoxian's wound was still bleeding. That black gas seemed to be getting thicker and thicker. He actually relied on his own strength, slowly walked out step by step. His imposing manner in that instant enveloped everyone. That dark green Taoist robe instead fluttered by itself without wind, indistinctly seen his hands, deeply clenched into fists. Even his nails had sunk into his palms. He looked ahead, straightened his body, facing Taoist Song Song, as if facing that invisible white figure, laughed loudly. "Good, good, good. Didn't expect that case actually made you so concerned. Come and try, see if I, the senior brother, is really worthy to be the head." He looked sideways at Song Song. Suddenly both of his hands from clenched fists abruptly opened his palms from the wound on his right hand. Drops of black blood spurted out, and the black gas on his face also gradually faded. Just that his face turned even paler, but his voice instead turned mournful with a trace of disdain. "You think you are worthy?" Taoist Song Song suddenly laughed loudly, said, "Yes, you are powerful. At that time in Qingyun's sect, one senior brother, and you were always the peerless pair of prides. I'm not your match, but someone will take care of you." Reverend Daoxian's face was solemn, coldly said, "Who is it?" In the great hall, everyone held their breath. Qingyun's sect disciples looked at each other, and standing at the side watching Qingyun's sect's internal strife, Tianyin Temple, Funxiang Valley, etc., also looked embarrassed. Taoist Song Song's laughter did not stop, and at this moment, suddenly, from far outside Crystal Hall, a deep voice was heard. "Daoxian, old friend, we haven't met for 100 years. Seeing that you are as graceful as before, congratulations." The voice was like thunder, rumbling over. In a short moment, outside Tongtian Peak, suddenly battle cries were heard. The front of the mountain was in chaos. In the midst of the panic, from afar there seemed to be someone shouting, "The evil faction sorcerers are attacking the mountain." What? Jadian people all turned pale. Reverend Daoxian gasped, pointed at Taoist Song Song, almost unbelievably said, You dare to betray the sect, collude with the evil sect." Taoist Song Song laughed wildly, said, "That's right, I am colluding with the evil sect, so what? From what I see, Jadian hides evil, worse than the evil sect. In order to avenge one's senior brother, I don't care even if I go to hell, not to mention colluding with the evil sect." Serene's face was pale, whispered, "Crazy, crazy. He is really crazy." Tian Belize heard it. His face was serious. He knew these years, Taoist Song Song's power in Jadian was very high. Even the daily defense was also handled by him. And today, The evil sect's large-scale attack was discovered only when they almost reached Crystal Hall. The situation was really bad. It could not be any worse. In the blink of an eye, in the midst of the chaos, his little disciple Shadanan was still standing there, holding the fire stick. While others were not paying attention, he pulled them behind him, but in the blink of an eye, he found there was something wrong with his little disciple. Shadanan's eyes were faintly red, staring at Taoist Song Song's figure. His mouth seemed to be mumbling something. It's him, it must be him. Chapter 150. Who is it? A few shouts of Qingyun disciples were heard outside the Crystal Hall at the same time, but a few sounds were heard, as if there were highly skilled people arriving from the air, following which a few sounds were heard. A few Qingyun disciples fell in and rolled on the ground. At the entrance, 4 figures appeared. They were the evil faction's 4 great sect leaders. Yuyang and God of Poison stood in the middle. Ghost King and Samyao Fairy stood on both sides. The 4 of them glanced into the hall and unhurriedly walked in. The oldest God of Poison made a sound of tsk tisk, laughed, and said, "Old friend Daoxian, 100 years no see, how are you?" Reverend Daoxian's body shook. His pupils contracted, coldly said, "God of Poison." God of Poison laughed and said, "It is me, this old bastard. 100 years ago at that Qingyun hill foot, I was defeated by your sword. Now I see you again as graceful as before. I am really gratified." Reverend Daoxian looked at the 4 of them. At the same time, from outside the Crystal Hall, several more evil faction people walked in one after another. Looking at their demeanor, most likely none of them were easy to get along with. Most likely the evil faction's strength for the past 100 years were all here. Among them, those whom the crowd had seen before, were Ghost King's sect Qing Long, Yu Wendu clan by Duzi, etc. As for the rest, most of them were the highly skilled people from the 4 great sections. And at a distance, the shouts became louder and louder. Desperate cries could be heard from time to time. The Qingyun Hill, which was like a paradise in the mortal world, right now seemed to be shrouded in blood, like hell. Reverend Daoxian breathed deeply, forced himself to calm down. Today the calamity arose from within the walls. The external enemies actually came straight in. Needless to ask, this was Qingyun's sect's most critical moment in these 100 years. As Qingyun's sect, this 1,000-years-old sect supreme sect leader, he definitely could not let this foundation be destroyed in his own hands. At this moment, suddenly a Buddhist proclamation was heard. Puong Master was standing beside Reverend Daoxian. A faint smile on his face said, "Daoxian senior brother, since ancient times evil never triumphed over good, our Tianyin Temple branch has always fought side by side with Qingyun sect against evil and evil. If you have any errands, just let us know." Daoxian was overjoyed, and almost at the same time, the Funxiang Valley people, with that Shangwan elder as the leader, stood out and stood behind Reverend Daoxian and Puhong Master. The evil faction, 4 great leaders' countenance changed slightly. God of Poison looked at Puhong, in a deep voice said, "Which holy monk is this master from Tianyin Temple?" Puhong smiled and said, "Old patron is really forgetful. 100 years ago in the Good and Evil War, we also met once. How could you have forgotten me? This old monk is Tianyin Temple's Puhong. This one beside me is my junior brother Pukong." Tianyin Temple, 4 great holy monks were so famous. With these 2 around, it was equivalent to Qingyun's sect gaining a few experts. Moreover, there were Funxiang Valley experts beside them. God of Poison turned his head and frowned at Taoist Song Song, whose face was slightly pale. "Why are these people here?" Taoist Song Song fiercely said, "These bald donkeys and Funxiang Valley fellows all suddenly arrived at Qingyun Hill this morning. There was no news beforehand. I was caught unprepared and unable to report." Puhong and Funxiang Valley Shangwan elder behind him looked at each other. Both laughed out. Funxiang Valley Shangwan so laughed out loud and said, "This is what is called evil will never triumph over good. Heaven's net has a long reach. Today we will definitely let all of you audacious evil demons and evil sects all be executed on this Qingyun Hill." Hee hee. A cold laugh. It was Yang Zi who was standing beside God of Poison. The person who was pushed by the evil faction people to be the person in charge, his expression arrogant, sneered and said, 100 years ago, our holy sect seniors also used our holy sect power to fight with your three big sects. Don't tell me we are afraid of you today. Well said. Cheers immediately sounded. Many of them were from the crowd, standing behind the four great leaders. Even beside him, Ghost King also clapped his hands and laughed. Today we will let all of you see, whether it is us being executed or you all receiving death. This sentence, he said, was incomparably savage, disdainful of all living beings. The good faction people's countenance did not change, their faces filled with hatred, especially the last word, death. Ghost King seemed to specially accentuate his tone, full of sarcasm. Reverend Daoxian sneered, was about to say something, but Yuangzi in the evil faction seemed to be the most impatient. With a wave of his hand, immediately all of the evil faction experts' hands and bodies lit up with different colored lights, obviously ready to attack. The good faction here, Qing Yun sect, Tianyin Temple people immediately concentrated and prepared, knowing that what was in front of them was the most dangerous good and evil battle in 100 years. Pu Hong quietly chanted, Ba, good indeed, good. Unexpectedly, before he could finish his sentence, a strange change occurred. Just when everyone's attention was on the evil faction people, suddenly a dozen of lights from the good faction people floated up at the same time, among them two sharp lights, directly hit Pu Hong's unguarded back. Boom! In that instant, the good faction exploded like a frying pan. It was a mess. Sharp, angry roars immediately resounded. Pu Hong Master's vision darkened, felt two strong forces hitting his back, one like a landslide or tsunami. The other turned into a sharp needle, suddenly pierced in. Pu Hong Master staggered. Pu spat out mist of blood, but what kind of person was he? In a blink he knew there was a traitor in the good faction. An extraordinary great Brahmin wisdom true way instantly circulated through his entire body, forcibly blocked that strong force. At the same time, without turning back, a sleeve flung backwards. With two muffled bangs, two cries of alarm came from the people behind him. It was obvious that they had suffered a loss. That huge force immediately dissipated, but the other force that was like a poisonous needle turned into a tangible object and finally pierced through his Brahmin Prajna body protection, which was caught off guard, and drilled into his body. In just a short while, Qingyin, Sek Tianbui, and the rest had already rushed over, started to attack, but the attacker, after one attack, immediately leapt up and flew into the evil faction people. The leader was Funxiang Valley. Shangwan, Su, and the rest of the attackers were all from Funxiang Valley. The good faction people, including Pu Hong, Pu Kong, and the rest of Tianyin Temple people who were sneak attacked, were all stunned. Reverend Daoxian, after a long while, tried his best to compose himself, pointed at Shangwan Su, and said, "You, what are you doing? Don't tell me Funxiang Valley has also surrendered to the evil faction?" Shangwan Su stood beside the four evil faction sect leaders, and Taoist Song Song looked at them at the same time, suddenly laughed out loud, his attitude extremely savage, filled with complacency. Ghost King laughed and said to Reverend Daoxian, "Who told you they are Funxiang Valley people?" Reverend Daoxian was about to speak. Suddenly he lost his voice, slowly turned his head, stared at Taoist Song Song. His face pale, said, "Good, good. You have done well, indeed, crossing the sea by deceiving the heavens." Taoist Song Song sneered, his face full of complacency, but instead smiled and said, "Isn't this all thanks to Ghost King sect leaders' resourcefulness and resourcefulness?" Once he heard that today, Tianyin Temple bald donkeys suddenly came uninvited and wanted to spoil my plan, he immediately thought of sending highly skilled martial artists to disguise as Funxiang Valley disciples up the mountain, picked a few who usually do not roam the world, and let me introduce them. As expected it was. A success in one fell swoop. Reverend Daoxian's body swayed, turned to look, this time the evil faction ambush. Most of the targets were concentrated among the Tianyin Temple monks. 9 out of 10 were seriously injured, especially Pu Hong Master. His face was as white as paper. Right now he could no longer stand. With the support of his disciples Fa Xiang, he slowly sat down, and on his back, it was a mess of blood and flesh. As for the rest, their conditions were not much better. And in Qingyin's sect, 5 or 6 elders were also injured. His heart was in turmoil. His heart also gradually sank. He laughed bitterly and said, "Impressive, impressive. To think I have lived in vain for so many years. I did not expect that Funxiang Valley Shangwan's Su brother had always been guarding the Inferno altar. Never took half a step out of Funxiang Valley. Actually, did not suspect you." Ghost King looked at him, smiled, and shook his head, said, "It's not that you did not think of this, but you did not expect your Tsang Song junior brother to betray you, right?" Reverend Daoxian laughed bitterly again. Crystal Hall instantly fell into silence. The good faction people looked at each other. Right now, anyone could tell the evil faction side had already gained a great advantage. Although Qingyun's sect still had quite a number of skilled elders, but the evil faction side, the number of skilled experts was only more. Among the Tianyin Temple monks, it looked like only half of them could make a move. Among them, only Pukong and Fa Xiong because of their vigilance and avoided injury. Especially Pukong. Right now, it was as if he had changed into another person, holding a golden alms bowl in his hand. Golden light shot out in all directions, almost like a ferocious god. In front of him was a pile of flesh and blood. It was an evil faction highly skilled person who failed to ambush him, and instead was turned into minced meat by Pukong's magical weapon Golden Buddha alms bowl. But the most important thing was the two great masters who had always been known as the Mount Tai and Big Dipper of the world's good faction, Reverend Daoxian and Puhong Master, were both seriously injured at the same time. Right now, looking at Puhong Master's face as white as gold paper. Although Reverend Daoxian was slightly better, but no matter how one looked at it, he looked like an arrow at the end of its flight. Could it be that the world's good faction had really reached its end? This question was like the heaviest stone pressing heavily on the good faction's hearts. On the contrary, the evil faction members were all elated. For hundreds of years the evil faction was chased out of the Central Plains, trapped in the wildlands. Today, once they could vent their anger, how could they not be high-spirited? Yangzi felt that this time he was in charge of the overall situation. The holy sect against the incomparably powerful good faction, two great sects actually won in one fell swoop. In the future in the holy sect, his position would definitely be above everyone else. Maybe from today onwards, he would be able to bring Changshan Hall to the situation of Elder Blackheart's Blood Forger Hall 800 years ago. With that thought, Yangzi was even more complacent, faced Reverend Daoxian and arrogantly laughed and said, "Old thief Daoxian, quickly hand over your sect treasure, Zhu Xian ancient sword, and then join our holy sect. I will spare your lives." Ha ha ha. The several evil faction, highly skilled people standing behind him roared with laughter. These 100 years of resentment seemed to be able to be vented to their heart's content today. And from afar, the cries of Qingyun disciples who were fighting on Tongtian Peak were heard incessantly. It seemed to pave the way for Qingyun's sect's current fate. Reverend Daoxian's deathly pale face instead had unswerving determination. He snorted disdainfully and coldly said, "Even if our Qingyun sect is ruined in your hands today, don't even think of making us bend our knees and surrender." Speaking, he retreated a few steps and returned to the Qingyun sect crowd. Tianbi, Shang Zhengliang, and the rest of the elders immediately crowded over. His proud disciple Xiao Yikai also supported his body, quietly and anxiously said, "Teacher, your body." Reverend Daoxian snorted, anxiously said, "The calamity is imminent. Tian Junior Brother, Shang Junior Brother, Zheng Junior Brother, Tianyin Junior Brother, all you hold on here for a while, Shuiwa Junior Sister. You lead a few second-generation disciples and send our Tianyin Temple friends away first. They are injured in order to help our Qingyun. We cannot let them suffer any more injuries." Those who were instructed by him immediately nodded and agreed. Tian Bui followed and said, "Sect head senior brother, we will hold here. You are seriously injured. You should also leave quickly, as long as you stay alive. Another day." He suddenly stopped, but everyone knew what he meant. Zhang Shuchong and the rest of the leaders nodded at the same time, but Reverend Daoxian gave a bitter laugh and said, "Founder's Foundation, don't tell me you are asking me to abandon it. Daoxian would rather die than be a sinner for eternity." Tian Bui and the rest were silent. Daoxian glanced at the evil faction people who were already ready to make a move. Suddenly, as if he had made up his mind, quietly said, "Now that things have come to this, we can only go against the Founder's commandments. Use that final killing move." The rest, including most of the elders, were stunned. Daoxian took a deep breath, cut in, "There is not much time. I will go get the Zhu Xian ancient sword, you all." He looked around, suddenly quietly said, "No matter what you all think of me in your hearts, but now that things have come to this, all of you must be careful. Do not commit suicide." Tian Bui and the rest were moved, were about to say something. Suddenly a wild laughter was heard. The magical weapons flashed. The evil faction people finally started to make their move. In that instant, the originally solemn and serene Crystal Hall, magical weapons danced in the air, strange lights crisscrossed, the deafening noises incessantly. Chapter 151. In the chaos, taking advantage of Qing Yun sect elders and masters resisting the evil faction masters' frenzied attacks, Shui Wei led the young disciples to help Tianyin Temple's heavily injured masters into the rear hall. Reverend Daoxian also walked towards the back, but his footsteps were indistinctly staggering. Tian Bui saw this scene in the midst of the battle, a burst of anxiety in his heart. His gaze swept across. The flaming celestial sword in his hand forced back the Falcon people in front of him, flashed to the side of Kaheo and Bei, who were fighting the enemy with the other elders, but their faces were pale, hurriedly said, "You two are not needed here. Immediately follow and escort sect head Reverend." Kevern and Bei were shocked, but seeing Tian Buli's stern face, he did not dare to disobey the order, and right now head of Dragon Head Valley Taoist Vas Kalo suddenly betrayed them. To these Dragon Head Valley disciples, it was no less than a thunderbolt from the clear sky. They had already lost their composure. Right now, they quickly responded and followed Vas Kalo. And looking at their figures, Suru, who was fighting at the side, frowned tightly. After a moment, she also found an opportunity to extricate herself, flashed to Xavion and Tian Linger's side, quietly said, "Your Vas Kalo teacher, uncle," suddenly rebelled. "His disciples also do not know if they are reliable. You all also follow up and watch sect head Reverend." Xavion and Hede were surprised, then understood and immediately followed. Serene was about to turn around. Suddenly she saw Sha Danan, the little disciple who was the focus of attention, was standing there like no one cared about him. His eyes were staring at the falcon from far away, motionless. She frowned. In her heart, she was the same as Tian Belize, did not believe that this little disciple could be a falcon spy. Thinking about Sha Danan's shallow cultivation, she immediately flashed next to him, patted his shoulder. Sha Danan's body shook, turned his head. Serene was surprised. Sha Danan's eyes were bloodshot, although his mind was still clear, but for some reason, there was a strange, evil feeling. But the situation was urgent. Serene could not think much, hurriedly said, "Xiao Fan, this place is too dangerous. You also follow your to Xixiang and Ling Er Shiji." Sha Danan startled, but under the gaze of the Shenyang who loved him since he was young, he finally nodded, then ran to the back hall. Suru was relieved. She then threw herself into the fray and joined the battle. Sha Danan ran into the back of the hall, caught up with Xavion and Hede, then caught up with Kevern and Bei. They surrounded Master Doyle Shun. Master Doyle Shun looked at them, nodded slightly, but when his eyes fell on Sha Danan, he couldn't help but stop for a moment, then moved away. Sha Danan did not know what was the feeling in his heart, but the fire stick in his hand was faintly glowing with green light. His mind felt dizzy. He could feel the evil spirit was rushing into his mind. He could not help but imagine the smell of blood. But everyone's heart was heavy. No one noticed Sha Danan's strange expression. After a while, Anan and Wen Min from Small Bamboo Valley appeared in front of everyone. Anan looked at Sha Danan, then said to Master Doyle Shun, "It was Master who asked me and Bako Shiji to come here." Master Doyle Shun sighed, shook his head, but did not say anything. He still walked forward. Not waiting for them to walk far, a thunderous rumble was heard from the crystal hall behind them. A few pillars of light shot up to the sky, actually broke through the roof of the crystal hall, straight up to the sky, mixed with a few miserable cries, not knowing who exactly lost their lives. Everyone was pale. They knew how cruel the battle in Crystal Hall was. They could not help but worry for their masters. Master Doyle Shun took a deep look at that place. His face was tense. He suddenly swung his Taoist robe and strode away. The young disciples followed behind him, saw this figure whom they revered like a deity in the past. Right now his body was still as tall and straight as usual, but on his dark green Taoist robe, that ghastly black blood stain soaked in fresh blood, even that sword hole left by Taoist Song Song's sneak attack, was incomparably clear. Really did not know how this Reverend Daoxian was able to sustain after suffering such a serious injury. The group of people passed through the rear hall. None of the young disciples were senior disciples and had never been here before, only followed Reverend Daoxian through the hall and the courtyard. Gradually, the clamor in the Crystal Hall also slowly faded away. The group of them passed through the rear hall, headed towards Tongtian Peak's rear mountain. Reverend Daoxian led the way. The rest followed closely behind him, vigilantly watching the surroundings. Although at this moment, most of the evil faction disciples were attacking the front mountain, but no one could say for sure if there would be someone lured to the back mountain by Taoist Song Song. Sha Danan walked behind them. His eyes were red, his face expressionless, but his heart was like a storm, shocked by Jadian's disaster and struggling with the blood feud. In his memory, who was the murderer who massacred Grass Temple Village? Although he did not see it with his own eyes, but every time he recalled the scene, he would think of the fierce and mysterious black-clothed man. Now it seemed that it was most likely Master Vasp Kalo. Although there were 2 orphans in Grass Temple Village, but only Sha Danan saw the black-clothed man and Posey fight. Now that it was confirmed, the hatred of many years rose in his heart. The fire stick that was made from the world's 2 most vicious weapons, Life Stealer, was stimulated by its master's hatred. The deeply buried evil energy also rose up and affected Sha Danan. If it was during normal days, not to mention with Reverend Doyle Shin's cultivation, even Tian Bui would have already discovered something wrong with Sha Danan, but right now, would have the mind to care about him. No one knew. This Jadian's little disciple was already standing in the most intense mental state, the crucial moment of the battle between man and nature, if not careful, most likely would be infected by the deep demonic energy of Devour Blood and be doomed eternally. As expected, the fact proved that Tian Belize, Shui Yu and others' concern was not without reason. Although the path behind Peak of Widows was secluded, after a short distance, several Falcon disciples rushed out from both sides. Kevern and others immediately went catch them. Reverend Daoxian only took a few glances, ignored them, and walked straight ahead. This time for the attack on Qing Yun, the evil sect really sent out all their elites. Even the disciples who appeared here, their skills were not shallow. Kaheo, Ainin, and the rest were in a hurry and could not handle them. Xavion and the rest continued to protect Reverend Doyle Shun, leaving Kaheo and Ainin to block the enemies. Right now, everyone had a question. Why did Reverend Doyle Shun not fly? Could it be that his injuries were already so serious? But no one dared to ask him. After a while, several Falcon disciples rushed out from both sides. Xavion, Bako, and Hidi blocked them. Sha Danan and Bei were also about to go forward. Xavion quickly said, "The 3 of us are enough. You go protect Headmaster." Bei gritted his teeth, pulled Sha Danan, and ran forward, once again catching up with Master Doyle Shun. This time, unexpectedly, they did not encounter any Falcon followers. Master Doyle Shun led them to the back of the mountain along a secluded path for a while, then stopped at a crossroad. Bei and Sha Danan also stopped. Sha Danan did not say anything. Bei raised his head and looked at Master Doyle Shun. Reverend Daoxian turned his head and looked, suddenly startled. His expression seemed to change, as if it was a coincidence of heaven's will. These 2 people happened to be the 2 orphans of Grass Temple Village. After this, it is our Mount Jadian's sacred place, Phantom Moon Cave. I need to go in. All of you wait here, and don't let anyone from the Devil Cult break in. The other road leads to Founder's Ancestral Hall. You. Bei looked determined, nodded heavily, said loudly, "Head rest assured." Master Doyle Shun glanced at him, but his eyes fell on the Dragon Slayer's sword in his hand. In this quiet and secluded place, the Dragon Slayer's sword glowed with green light, as if it was longing for something. This youth was filled with passion and unswerving determination, indistinctly. Reverend Daoxian suddenly turned around, gazed towards the Founder's ancestral hall path, did not speak again, headed towards the other path, walked straight. Bei watched Master Doyle Shun disappear on the path, then turn around. His eyebrows were tightly knitted. His emotions were difficult to calm down. Even his breathing became heavier. It was no wonder Jadian suddenly encountered a disaster and Master Vascalo, whom he had always regarded as his father, suddenly betrayed them. How could it not make him feel dizzy? Shah Danan slowly raised his head, looked at the foot of the mountain, at the direction of Crystal Hall. But he could only see the dense forest. Not even a corner of the eaves or the hall could be seen. But on the other road, toward Founder's ancestral hall, behind the forest, there were faint traces of houses, faint sounds of bells. From the extremely tense battlefield, suddenly arriving at this extremely quiet place, both of them were not used to it. Bei panted heavily, took a deep breath, slowly calmed down his breathing. Suddenly, a dragon-like roar came from the front of the mountain. Even though it was so far away, the sound waves were still like an avalanche. Heaven and earth changed color. Both of them were surprised. Bei was the first to react, said happily, "It's Master Spirit." Shah Danan could also hear that it was indeed the roar of Water Kirin. Apparently, the spirit beast that guarded Mount Jadian for thousands of years was finally disturbed and attacked. But it was not hard to imagine how intense the battle situation of Jadian was. Both of them had their own thoughts, waiting for Master Doyle Shun. But their peaceful time did not last long. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps sounded. Both of them were surprised. They thought it best if Kevern and others arrived, or else. Unexpectedly, as if God was also against Jadian, after a moment, 5 Falcon disciples appeared. The person leading them was actually the fake Shangwan, who had just ambushed Puhong Master. Seeing them here, he immediately rushed toward them with a grin. Among them, there were even people looking behind them. Bei's mind turned quickly. Just by looking at these 5 people, he knew they were not weak. Not to mention himself, it was still a problem whether he could defeat the 5 of them together. But Master Doyle Shun had entered Illusory Moon Cave. He could not let them in no matter what. In his anxiety, he suddenly made up his mind, made a prompt decision, whispered to Shah Danan, "Xiao Fan, I will lead them to the other side. You guard here." Shah Danan startled. Before he could react, Bei had already rushed out. Dragon Slayer turned into a green light, swept toward the 5 black-clothed people. Shangwan Su and others frowned, surprised. Their faces immediately became serious. It seemed they did not expect this little Jadian disciple's cultivation to be so high. They immediately surrounded him, leaving only Shangwan Su to guard the formation. At the same time, they also paid attention to Shah Danan's movement. Lin Jingyu exchanged a few moves with them. As expected, these evil faction disciples were highly skilled. 3 of them were only slightly weaker than him, but the one leading them was on par with him. Now that the 4 of them surrounded him, he was immediately at a disadvantage. Bei frowned tightly. He did not want to continue the fight. He immediately retreated toward the other side of the road. The fake Shangwan pondered for a moment, then brought the 3 people and chased after him. After a moment, only one black-clothed person and Shah Danan were left. That black-clothed person sneered. He looked at Shah Danan. That young man seemed to have heard something. He slowly raised his head. What appeared in front of him was a pair of blood-red eyes that were filled with a nameless and violent aura. In the quiet forest of Mount Jadian, birds suddenly flew away in fright. From afar, the angry roar of Water Kirin came faintly, echoing between heaven and earth. Chapter 152. In the back of Jadian Hill, there were 2 important places. One of them was Qin Yun Sek's most important sacred place, the Illusory Moon Cave. 1,000 years ago, the extremely talented Qin Yi Patriarch had secluded himself here to comprehend the Tao. From then on, Qin Yun Sect dominated the world and led the heroes. And after Master Qingyi, Moon Cave became Jadian's most sacred place for 1,000 years. Only the head could enter this place. And the other place was Founder's Ancestral Hall. As the name suggested, naturally it was the place to worship Jadian's ancestors. From Jadian, who founded Jadian, to Master Qingyi, and then to the ancestors. They all had their memorial tablets in this Founder's Ancestral Hall, incense burning every day. And on every important day, Jadian, under the leadership of the head, would solemnly worship the ancestors here. It could also be considered as an important place in Jadian. But other than the day of worship, this place was extremely deserted. When Lin Jingyu led the 4 evil faction disciples away and ran into this place, he saw in the vast open space a grand and imposing hall stood erect for corner eaves, glazed tile roof, antique door plate, and red pillars, as if in this piece of tranquility it was narrating the history of the past. Bursts of light smoke from the deep and somewhat dark hall. Looking from the outside, the inside was dotted with candles, and there were even long burning lamps swaying slightly, hanging in the air. But other than an old man in plain clothes who was silently sweeping the floor in front of the hall, there was no one else. At this time, hearing the hurried footsteps, the old man slowly raised his head, looked over. Bei's heart was filled with regret. At that time, he only wanted to lure the Falcon disciples away from Moon Cave. Unexpectedly, he mistakenly entered Founder's Ancestral Hall. Here worshipped the ancestors' memorial tablets. If it was destroyed by the Falcon disciples, he really could not absolve himself of the guilt, even if he died 10,000 times. Thinking of this, Bei suddenly stopped, Dragon Slayer's sword in front of him, turned and faced the fake Shangguan Su and the others who were chasing him. At this time, in the distant forest, there were suddenly startled birds, a burst of noise. Bei was startled. Looking at the direction where Sha Danan was, he could not help but worry. But after all, he knew that it was a great enemy in front of him. He forced himself to calm down, focused his attention, and prepared himself, secretly decided that even if he died here today, he would not let these Falcon thieves step in a Founder's Ancestral Hall. Dragon Slayer swords seemed to have spiritual energy, shining with green light, contrasting with its owner's face, extremely determined. The old man sweeping the floor in front of Founder's Ancestral Hall saw the Dragon Slayer sword in Bei's hand. His body suddenly shook. The 4 Falcon disciples looked at each other and laughed. These people were obviously of high status in the Falcon disciples, obviously had a high position in Jadian. With one look they could tell this place must be important to Jadian. That fake Shangguan Su proudly smiled and said, "Little brat, I see that your aptitude is not bad. Now that Qingyan sect is at a dead end, why don't you join my sect? I guarantee that you will be successful in the future." Bah! Lin Jingyu felt a wave of disgust in his heart. He sneered and ignored him. That fake Shangguan Su surprisingly was not angry. He coldly laughed and said, "Fine, since you want to die, I will fulfill your wish." After speaking, he signaled with his eyes. The other 3 black-attired men immediately attacked. Lin Jingyu clenched his teeth tightly. The Dragon Slayer's sword rippled with jade-green waves, held horizontally in front of him. The magical weapons used by the 3 men in black were a yellow flying sword, a long halberd, and the strangest and most frightening one. It was a white bone sword made from several human skeletons, and it was filled with dense energy. Lin Jingyu, 1 against 3, clenched his teeth and fought bitterly. The Dragon Slayer sword's green light crisscrossed, defending his original position. Unexpectedly did not retreat, but gradually he was still at a disadvantage. Lin Jingyu entered Jadian's sect at a young age. His aptitude was excellent. Taoist Song Song thought highly of him. Not only did he meticulously guide him, he even passed down the Dragon Slayer sword, which had a great history to him, not knowing if it was because in this youth he saw the shadow of that person whom he revered in the past. And Lin Jingyu, indeed, did not disappoint Taoist Song Song's painstaking efforts. In just a few years, relying on his own exceptional aptitude and that deeply buried conviction to avenge his parents and loved ones, his skills advanced by leaps and bounds. In just a few years, he was already one of the best among the younger generation of disciples. Just that no matter how diligent he was, his training was after all limited by time. He could not be too aggressive. Right now, facing the three evil faction disciples in black, that long halberd in front of him unceasingly smashed down. The flying sword beside him aimed for empty air and sneak attacks. What was even more troublesome was that white bone sword. The Een energy was dense and cold. Under the control of that evil faction disciple, it flickered in and out of sight. Every time he blocked, the Een energy attacked. He could not help but inhale a breath of cold air, his entire body trembling. Such a bitter battle for more than 10 rounds. Even though Lin Jingyu defended with all his might, the Dragon Slayer sword Jade Greenlight was still gradually being suppressed by those three men in black. It looked like he was about to lose. Finally, he could not hold on any longer and took a step back. The fake Shangwan, Su, who was standing behind, coldly laughed. Once he took a step back, he immediately could not stop his steps. The three men in black were energized. Their magical weapons all came out. Lin Jingyu sweated profusely, kept on retreating. He wanted to stand still, but could not. Suddenly, that mysterious white bone sword suddenly disappeared. Lin Jingyu was just about to receive the long halberd which was smashing down on his head, and then used his sword to deflect the flying sword which was sneaking up from the side. Unexpectedly, his leg was in pain, and immediately he could not stand still. That white bone sword had unknowingly burrowed into the ground and stealthily arrived. Immediately, it slashed a big wound on his right leg, fresh blood dripping down. Lin Jingyu bellowed. The Dragon Slayer sword slashed down from the air. This celestial divine weapon struck onto the white bone sword. A slight sound. The white bone sword immediately fell out. A slight crack could be seen on the sword. The evil faction man who was using the white bone sword felt a heartache, quickly retrieved the white bone sword to take a closer look, but by this time the other two magical weapons had already arrived. The sound of the wind was piercingly cold. Lin Jingyu was in a dead end. He used the last of his strength and steered the Dragon Slayer sword horizontally above his head. Rumble, a loud sound, strange lights flashed chaotically, sparks shot in all directions. Not knowing where the power came from, the Dragon Slayer sword managed to block the two magical weapons, but Lin Jingyu's vision also turned black. But at this moment, while he was absent-minded for a moment, he suddenly saw the fake Shangwan, Su, who was standing far away, suddenly appeared in front of him, grinning hideously at him. Lin Jingyu turned pale with fright, but before he could react, a piercing pain in his chest, an extremely sharp force bore straight in. In an instant, all of his body protection skills were broken. Ah! Lin Jingyu, with a roar, his entire body flew out. Blood spurted out from his mouth. He could not even hold the Dragon Slayer sword. Flipped in the air, and finally, with a sound, stabbed into the ground, just in front of that elderly sweeping the floor. The jade green light circulated and gradually dimmed. Lin Jingyu's character had always been tenacious. He looked down at his chest and saw that in the mess of blood and flesh, the real wound was only the size of a fingertip, but right now a sharp energy charged straight into his body, like an indestructible fine needle, rampaging and colliding randomly. The meridians in his body were in unbearable pain. He wanted to get up again to face the enemy, but unexpectedly his legs gave way, and he could not stand up. He panted heavily. The fake Shangwan, Su, and the rest instead laughed loudly, extremely pleased with themselves. "Little fellow, how is it? I only used 50% of my power, and I can already beat you to this state, still not surrendering quickly." Lin Jingyu's facial muscles twitched. Obviously his body was in extreme pain, but the impending disaster made him even more anxious. Once he thought of the Founder's ancestral hall behind him, he did not know where the strength came from, struggled to slowly climb up. The evil faction and the rest did not stop him, only stood at the side like watching a monkey show. That piercing pain seemed to rush up to the top of his head. Lin Jingyu had not even steadied himself when he felt another bout of dizziness. He turned his head and panted heavily, desperately staggered toward the Dragon Slayer sword in front of that elderly, sweeping the floor, panting, "Elderly, it is dangerous here. Quickly, quickly, quickly leave." That elderly looked like the person who cleaned the Founder's ancestral hall daily in Qinyan's sect, his face haggard, wrinkles deep, as if cut by knives. Strangely, when Lin Jingyu was fighting with the evil faction people, he had been quietly watching at the side, did not run away, and did not speak. At this moment, he glanced at Lin Jingyu's chest and suddenly said indifferently, "Human separation all. You are the evil faction, Chong, Shun Hall, Assassin Join." The four evil faction people's smiles froze. That fake Shangguan's expression suddenly turned cold, said, "Didn't expect there to be an expert here. That's right. I am Join. Who is your excellency?" That withered old man did not answer him. He continued, "The separation all was originally a rare treasure of the evil faction. Its power was extremely great, but in the hands of a lowly person like you, it became a weapon used to plot against people. It really is a disgrace to this rare treasure." Chapter 153. Zhou Yin was enraged, but for the moment he could not figure out the identity of this mysterious old man, and saw that although he looked shaky but his tone was frighteningly loud, he couldn't help but felt uneasy. Angrily said, "Who exactly are you?" That old man sighed and said, "Who am I? Even I myself have forgotten who I am." When he spoke, his face was sorrowful, his tone full of desolation. Then he turned his head and spoke to Lin Jingyu. "Child." Lin Jingyu was taken aback, quickly said, "Yes, senior." That old man assessed him from head to toe, seemed to reveal a smile, and said, "Whose sect are you under?" Lin Jingyu, for some reason. Right now he suddenly felt an indescribable reverence towards this old man, immediately said in a low voice, "Disciple is under Taoist Song of Longshou Valley." Halfway through his words, he suddenly recalled that Taoist Song had already betrayed Qing Yun. Immediately an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart, a sourness in his heart. He couldn't continue. That old man nodded his head, quietly said, "It is Song. He really has good taste in accepting disciples. As he spoke, he stretched out his trembling hand, grabbed the dragon slayer sword that was stabbed into the ground. Lin Jingyu looked at his slow movements, suddenly felt nervous, as if his heart was anticipating something. He couldn't help but hold his breath. That pair of withered and aged hands, not knowing how much wind and frost it had experienced, when he once again touched the hard and cold sword hilt. Then he held it tightly. Inside the founder's ancestral hall, suddenly, a faint bell sound was heard. Chonglang. Suddenly, the originally dim dragon slayer sword abruptly soared with green light. That flourishing light was like the blazing sun in the horizon, glaring and unable to stare at. That old man unhurriedly pulled out the dragon slayer sword. Every inch he pulled, the dragon slayer sword seemed to tremble in agitation. The dragons roar incessantly. That soul-shaking sound reverberated straight to the nine heavens. He straightened his body, slowly placed the dragon slayer sword in front of him, using his hand to gently caress it. His hand, which had been eroded by the passage of time, was as gentle as if he was caressing the woman he loved. The dragon slayer sword whistled. Even Lin Jingyu and the evil faction people who were far away seemed to feel that the dragon slayer sword seemed to suddenly have a spiritual agitation. Lin Jingyu stared in astonishment at the dragon slayer sword that he almost could not recognize. In the hands of the elderly, it radiated an incomparably resplendent radiance. And that withered elderly, after holding the divine sword, his entire person also seemed to have changed. An invisible, imposing manner surged out, as if he was the legendary ancient sword god. "Child, watch carefully. The dragon-slaying sword is not used the way you use it." That old man, in the surging jade-green light, said indifferently. He had just finished speaking when suddenly the jade-green light instantly exploded. The entire open space in that instant was enveloped by green, the sky covering the earth and the sky, and a sharp whistling sound. The dragon slayer sword flew out from the old man's hand, like lightning flashing sharply, charged straight ahead. The evil faction people saw the old man's imposing manner and had long been on guard, with a shout, at the same time wielding their magical weapons to attack. Only Zhou Yin stood at the back, frowning tightly, but did not make a move. The three of them almost used the same method that they used against Lin Jingyu. The long halberd attacking from the front, the flying swords rising up, the white bones were about to launch a sneak attack, but unexpectedly that old man completely ignored the yellow flying swords and white bone sword. The Dragon Slayer sword turned into a light pillar like a mountain, attacking with an overwhelming force. The evil faction disciple who was leading the halberd turned pale with fright and quickly wielded the long halberd to parry, but unexpectedly a crisp sound was heard. The Dragon Slayer sword, like cutting through ice and snow, cut the long halberd into two and, without any pause, chopped down from above. In Lin Jingyu's dumbstruck eyes, in the crowd's terrified eyes, that evil faction disciple from head to toe was cut into two halves. Blood rained down. And almost without a pause, in the sky full of blood, right now, like a devil's green light rolled up and charged toward the other two. The flying swords and white bone, which were originally attacking that old man. Right now, their hearts and courage were shattered. How would they dare to continue attacking? Immediately retreated, and at the same time urgently summoned their magical weapons. Just as the Dragon Slayer sword's sharp light filled the sky, in a blink of an eye, under everyone's eyes, crashed into it. Almost without even a cry of surprise, the green light submerged the two of them. The next moment, a shattering sound was heard. Not knowing what happened to the two of them, Lin Jingyu was drenched in cold sweat. His mind was almost taken away. Zhou Yin, who was standing furthest away, his countenance changed greatly. He knew that this old man was a terrifying expert, and he was definitely not his match. Immediately turned and flew away. Unexpectedly, that green light, like the roar of a mountain or the roar of a tsunami. In between, there was a dark red blood color, like lightning flying past, pursued him. Zhou Yin's skills were after all higher than the rest. His hands suddenly shook. A black gas flashed indistinctly. This sky full of green light actually paused in front of him. In the next moment, Zhou Yin suddenly turned pale, involuntarily cried out, "It's you. You are Wan." Before he finished his words, that mountain of green light which filled the sky and earth suddenly overturned the black gas which was struggling to support, struck down from above, slashing onto Zhou Yin's chest. Zhou Yin cried out miserably. His entire body was thrown far away. It looked like he would not survive. In a short while, the four evil faction people who were showing off their prowess just now were actually all dead. The sky full of jade green light, like a whale sucking in water, retracted into the Dragon Slayer sword, flew back into that old man's hand. Lin Jingyu slightly opened his mouth, but could not speak. That old man shook his head slightly, as if he was sighing about something, and then looked deeply at the Dragon Slayer sword in his hand, and then threw it to Lin Jingyu. Lin Jingyu subconsciously caught it, heard that old man turning back and walking towards Founder's ancestral hall. His mouth unhurriedly said, "Dragon Slayer sword, forged from 10,000 years of green crystals from the southern border's most bitter lands, killed countless evil. To use this sword, you must press forward, prioritize attack. Even if your skills are not enough, you must also have the determination to kill all the strong enemies. If not, then you will not be able to unleash its divine power. You must remember this in your heart." Lin Jingyu was stunned, but when he saw that the old man was about to enter Founder's ancestral hall, he suddenly came to his senses, urgently said, "Senior, today the evil faction is attacking Qing Yun in large scale. I implore you to help." That old man's body suddenly paused, but he did not turn around, only indifferently said, "Qing Yun's sect experts are as numerous as the clouds. Sect head Reverend Daoxian is even a rare genius expert. With him around, what is there to be afraid of?" Lin Jingyu stepped forward, sorrowfully said, But sect head Reverend is already seriously injured." That old man was obviously taken aback, abruptly turned his head and said, "Who is it that can injure Daoxian?" Lin Jingyu suddenly turned silent. He naturally knew who the culprit was, but right now, when he said Taoist Song Song's name, for some reason, he felt a wave of sorrow, as if he said it, he would have to break something with that person. For a moment, he could not speak. That old man instead continued to ask, "Where is Daoxian? How is he now?" Lin Jingyu said, "Sect head Reverend is seriously injured, but for some reason, he entered Illusory Moon Cave." Illusory Moon Cave. That old man's face suddenly calmed down. After a long while facing Lin Jingyu, it was more like he was facing himself, sighed and said, "Qing Yun's sect, 1,000 years old huge sect. What are you afraid of? Speaking, the old man once again slowly turned around. Lin Jingyu turned pale, exclaimed, "Old senior, don't tell me you're going to watch Qin Yin fall into danger and not help." That old man seemed to have a sorrowful smile, said, "Young man, Qin Yun's sect has been established for 2,000 years. The internal power. How can you know? Don't you worry." Lin Jingyu did not understand and was about to plead again. Suddenly he felt the Dragon Slayer's sword, which was originally quiet in his hand, suddenly became hot, as if it was stimulated. The green light once again lit up. Lin Jingyu looked at the Dragon Slayer's sword in his hand in shock, suddenly felt something, turned his head and looked towards the direction of Illusory Moon Cave, saw in between the mountain peaks a grand light charged up to the sky, and the Dragon Slayer sword in his hand seemed to be facing there, quietly chirping. "It has come into being. It has finally come into being." The old man, who was also looking over there, his face full of vicissitudes and complicated expression, quietly said, "Child, your luck is very good. Very soon you will be able to see that legendary ancient sword Zhu Xian." Chapter 154. That beam of light from the Illusory Moon Cave became brighter and brighter. What accompanied it was a low whistling sound. The withered old man, standing in front of the founder's ancestral hall, stared at that dazzling, brilliant light, lost in thought, until Lin Jingyu, in his astonishment, asked him, "Old senior, is that our Qin Yun sect's most valuable treasure, ancient sword Zhu Xian?" The elder silently nodded his head, suddenly turned around, as if he did not want to bother with anything, quietly said, "Once Zhu Xian is out, and also on this Qin Yun hill, with Daoshuan's cultivation, no one in the world will be able to resist. Go." Speaking to this point, half of his body had already disappeared into the shadows of the ancestral hall. Bei was a little reluctant, called out, "Senior." The old man paused, seemed like he thought of something, suddenly said, "If you have the intention, then find a chance, find Doyle Shan privately. Tell him that the servant in Founder's ancestral hall has been cooped up for hundreds of years. Now he wants you to come here often to talk. See if he will agree." Bei was startled, asked, "What?" The old man did not answer him. His body disappeared into the darkness. Bei startled for a moment, then turned around and looked. The beam of light seemed to become brighter, almost impossible to look at. At the same time, he remembered Sha Danan was still outside, so he immediately ran outside. After running for a while, he returned to the previous place. Bei looked at the scene. His body was shocked, immediately gasped. At the three-way intersection, there were still two people standing there. Sha Danan was standing there, and the other person was Ainin from Bamboo Height. But what surprised him the most was on the surrounding open space, there were blood stains, even on the leaves of the trees. It was like hell. And the man in black who was confronting Sha Danan died on the ground. His body was dry and pale, like all the blood in his body was drained. A bad premonition rose in Bei's heart. He immediately ran to Sha Danan, loudly said, "Xiao Fan, are you okay?" From the moment Bei appeared until now, Sha Danan did not turn back to look at him. Instead, he was facing Ainin. But the relationship between them was subtle. Ainin was holding Aeolian Firmus in her hand, guarding against Sha Danan. Bei saw Sha Danan as his own brother. Seeing Ainin was going to harm Sha Danan, he angrily said, "Lu Shimi, what are you doing?" Then he stood in front of Sha Danan, facing Ainin. Lu Sweki's expression was originally very complicated, like anger, like regret. Her eyes even had some sadness. At this moment, suddenly seeing Lin Jingyu between them, she couldn't help but cried out. Almost at the same time, a bloody hand was suddenly placed on Lin Jingyu's shoulder, staining his white robe red. The smell of fresh blood drifted from that hand and drilled into Lin Jingyu's nose. Lin Jingyu was taken aback. He turned around and asked in surprise, "Xiao Fan, are you all right?" What appeared in front of him was a pair of eyes glowing with dark red light, flashing with a few traces of pain. Sha Danan's face was wooden, his lips moved. Finally, the red light weakened. He said quietly, "I am fine." Bei was relieved, then said, "The head of faction may come out soon. We should prepare to kill with him." Sha Danan nodded, kept silent, but held the fire stick tighter in his hand. Anan stared at him. After a while, she slowly put away Aeolian Firmus, did not say a word. Lin Jingyu looked at her strangely. Originally wanted to ask what exactly happened here, but at this moment, from the direction of the illusory moon cave, the low reverberating strange howl suddenly became louder, abruptly rising. The sound shook the heaven and earth. That magnificent light became even more dazzling. In the halo, a figure slowly rose. Reverend Daoxian bathed in the resplendent light. His right hand from palm to shoulder was surrounded by a ball of dazzling, scorching white light. One could not see clearly what exactly he was holding in his hand. And his body, which was seriously injured and unable to fly, right now did not seem to have any hindrance, as if once this Zhu Xian ancient sword was out, even his body's energy was also completely replenished. Reverend Doyle Shun's dark green robe, fluttering in the light pillar, even his face was reflected by the bright white light beside his hand, looked especially pale. And he did not seem to notice Bei, Sha Danan, and the rest below him, flew straight to the direction of Crystal Hall. Bei and the rest were dumbfounded. This Zhu Xian ancient sword had not even been used. The power was already so great. Really did not know if it was used, how powerful would it be. The three of them were startled for a moment, then came to their senses, chased to the front mountain. Not long after they left, deep in the forest, a slim figure slowly appeared, walked out, looked at Sha Danan's gradually disappearing figure. The expression on her face was extremely complicated, silent. It was Bailu. Ever since Reverend Doyle Shun left, at Jadian Hill Front Mountain, with Crystal Hall as the center, the good and evil great battle was already extremely tragic. Back to 100 years ago, also at the foot of Jadian Hill, at that time the good faction's three great sects, Jadian, Skysong Temple, Funxiang Valley, joined hands to fight against the evil faction, one in one fell swoop. But now Funxiang Valley had no one here. The Skysong Temple's masters, including the abbot, Puhong Holy Monk, was instead injured by the evil faction people pretending to be Funxiang Valley people. Now, other than Pukong, Fa Xiang, and a few others, it was almost Jadian alone supporting. However, Jadian, a famous great sect that had been hanging for 2,000 years, today finally let people know how deep their foundation was. Tian Bui, Shang Zhengliang, Zheng Shuchong, and other heads of the table need not to mention. The other 7 houses also had several white-haired elders, together with Skysong Temple's Pukong, Fa Xiang, although the evil faction masters tried their best to attack, and also gained the upper hand but still could not defeat them. In this battle, there were close to 10 of the world's top cultivators fighting, even though the Crystal Hall was strengthened by the Immortals. In the end, it could not withstand the countless flying here and there, the collision of the magical weapons. The huge roof collapsed with a loud crash. Dust filled the air. Everyone was shocked. All flew up, but then fought from the ground to the sky. The bigger the place, it was easier to use. But the sky was filled with light. Dozens of battle groups flashed in the sky. The sharp light flashed, at times like a meteor whistling past. The peak of Jadian Hill seemed to be submerged in countless of bright light. The evil faction people used all kinds of strange magical weapons. On the other hand, on Qingyun's sect's side, most of the elders used celestial swords, but in the hands of these elders who had cultivated Tai Ji Xianqing Wei to Shangqing realm, those rays of celestial sword grand lights were able to move unhindered illusionary. If not for the fact that the evil faction had too many skilled fighters, most likely they would not be at a disadvantage. Although Tian Bui and others could still hold on, but the Jadian disciples below them, the situation was very dangerous. The evil faction's large-scale attack this time. They had already made a detailed arrangement, especially Master Vim. He was certain that because Sha Danan had a rare Esper and Skysong Temple's secret incantation, Jadian masters will definitely gather in Crystal Hall. So when they were dealing with Jadian disciples, according to Master Vaskalo's report, they ambushed Jadian disciples and suddenly attacked. It was really effective. Jadian disciples were in a mess, countless of casualties. But Master Vim did not expect one thing. That was Jadian's guardian spirit beast, Water Kirin. Since Master Jadian passed away 1,000 years ago, Water Kirin had been staying in the Jade Pool, free and unfettered, never really showed its power. Even in the good and evil war at Mount Jadian Foot 100 years ago, Water Kirin did not participate in the battle. So this generation of Jadian disciples, including Master Vaskalo, did not know the power of Water Kirin. But after being awakened by the battle between evil faction and Jadian disciples, Water Kirin, as the guardian spirit beast, naturally attacked in rage. This sudden change almost changed the situation. The water Qilin was standing in the middle of the turbulent Jade Pond. The entire pond water was revolving rapidly around this giant beast. Dozens of water pillars, the size of a man's arms, were controlled by this 1,000-year-old spirit beast using its spiritual power. In between the water pillars, there were also countless vengeful spirits and dead souls that were devoured by the water Qilin in the past, attacking from all directions, attacking the evil faction disciples. At first, the evil faction disciples did not put this strange beast in their eyes and attacked together. But when they touched the water pillars, they were defeated. Water Kirin's power was extremely strong. In a moment, 7 or 8 of them were killed by the water pillars, and another 7 or 8 were trapped by the wraiths in the water. The evil faction disciples were scared out of their wits and ran away. Jadian disciples were greatly energized. After a moment, the situation alerted the 4 evil faction leaders who were still in Crystal Hall. First they sent down several masters, then even Samuel Fairy and God of Poison came down one after another. Then they stabilized the situation and gradually trapped Water Kirin. Samuel Fairy and God of Poison were the leaders of the 4 great sects. Their statuses were not to be trifled with. Their skills naturally far surpassed the other evil faction masters. After the 2 of them entered the arena, Samuel Fairy used a soft, white, strange silk, which was hard to see with the naked eye, but she danced delicately, as if she was weaving an invisible net. The water Qilin controlled the water pillars to collide several times. It was incomparably ferocious, but it was blocked by this soft and hard-to-see invisible net, sliced into nothingness. As for God of Poison, after watching the intense battle between Water Kirin and Samuel Fairy, he nodded his head and took out a half-chi long, clear light circulating knife from his bosom. Holding in his right hand, his left hand was holding a jade bottle. He pulled out the cork, not knowing what was inside. After a moment, as if God of Poison had already activated his mental power, that knife suddenly shone brightly, swallowing and spitting out sharp rays. God of Poison gently waved, and immediately, like cutting tofu, the water pillar closest to him was cut off, and then he swiftly raised his left hand. Some blue powder in the air fell down to the place where the water pillar rose from. Water Kirin seemed to sense something, turned its head, and roared angrily. A loud sound was heard from that pool water. An even bigger water pillar soared up from where it was and headed straight for God of Poison. God of Poison's expression did not change, and indeed after a moment, Water Kirin suddenly roared loudly. This water pillar, which was heading towards God of Poison, dispersed with a loud bang and fell back into the pool. And that pool water nearby had already turned into a dark blue and serene color. Chapter 155. Just like that, God of Poison sliced and sprinkled poison at the same time. In a blink, the water column that Water Qilin controlled was destroyed by him by about half, while Samuel Fairy expressionlessly stood on the other side, using Hehuan Sect's secret lingering silk to tightly trap the water column that Water Qilin attacked. At this moment, anyone with discerning eyes would know that Water Qilin, under the pincer attack of these 2 great evil faction experts, was bound to lose. High up, Yangzi and Ghost King looked down side by side. Seeing that the situation had been stabilized, Yangzi looked pleased and said, "With the 2 sect leaders joining forces, no matter how powerful this beast is, it doesn't matter." Ghost King smiled and looked up at the sky, saw that under the siege of the crowd, although Qing Yun's sect was still resisting stubbornly, but they were after all outnumbered and were already straining, he smiled and said, "Young brother, today we have accomplished such a great merit. In the future in the holy sect, Your reputation will be unparalleled. Yangzi turned his head and looked at him, his mood extremely joyful, laughed out loud. Ghost King sneered in his heart, but on the surface he smiled and said, "So, in order to prevent more trouble, why don't we attack together and get rid of these Qing Yun sect fellows?" Yangzi was in high spirits and said, "All right, I will attack together with you." Ghost King nodded and smiled. "Brother, please go first." Yangzi laughed, leaped up, and stretched out his arm. A silver light flashed past. A strange black and white mirror appeared in his hand. Ghost King behind him, his face suddenly darkened. A cold glint flashed past deep in his eyes. His body moved, as if he was about to do something, but at this moment, in the distant horizon, suddenly a deep, strange whistle was heard. Suddenly, the entire Qing Yin mountain range, the towering Tongtian gigantic peak that had stood for thousands of years, seemed to tremble slightly. Suddenly, everyone's celestial swords and magical weapons in their hands, all slightly heated up and hummed towards that resplendent grand light. Tongtian Peak towered into the clouds. The sky, which had been clear for thousands of years, gradually darkened. Only that resplendent light in the horizon, like unrestrained heat energy, broke free from its shackles, soared above the 9 heavens, and flew over. In an instant, an incomparably brilliant radiance illuminated the world. The figure in the depths of the radiance raised his sword towards the sky. Everyone held their breaths and looked at the sky in astonishment. In this moment of absent-mindedness, the water cheetah in the pond of Jade gave a wild roar, but it did not attack God of Poison and Madame Samyao anymore. On the contrary, all the water pillars merged with a loud bang and formed an incomparably huge water pillar. It carried the water cheetah straight up to the sky and flew towards the depths of that light. The roars of spirit beasts reverberated in the sky. Taoist Song Song, who had been standing beside Ghost King and Yangzi and quietly watching the battle. After that light appeared, his face started to turn pale. Right now, he saw the water unicorn flying up with a loud bang. His body even swayed, involuntarily cried out, "Zhu Xian." Ghost King and Yangzi's countenance changed at the same time. Ghost King said in shock, "Didn't you say that only by cultivating Tai Chi Xian Qing Wei to Tai Qing realm can one control the Zhu Xian ancient sword and activate the Zhu Xian sword formation?" Song Song smiled bitterly. "That's right, but I didn't expect Dao Xian." Right now, everyone had already stopped fighting. Tian Bui and the rest landed back on the ground. In Qing Yun's sect, everyone's expression was agitated. This legendary ancient sword, which was once in the hands of Qing Yun's sect founder Qing Yi, today in Qing Yun's sect's most dangerous moment, once again appeared in the hands of sect head Reverend Dao Xian. In the mid-air, the water unicorn flew below. Dao Xian growled softly, its beast head slightly lowered, as if it, too, had an indescribable fear and respect towards this ancient sword. Dao Xian's entire person was hidden in the light, slowly landed on top of the spirit beast water unicorn's head. Deep breath, holding the sword, facing the sky. In the firmament, in the flourishing light, a strange incantation sound suddenly reverberated, as if the deities and Buddhas were singing in low voices, as if the 9 nether demons were grinning hideously. A nameless sense of awe drowned everyone at Qing Yun Hill. Suddenly, at the back mountain of Tongtian Peak from the direction of the illusory moon cave, a stream of purple energy rose majestically, shone directly on the water unicorn and Dao Xian, who was on top of its head. After a moment, from far away, looking at that direction, it was actually from the other 6 peaks of Qing Yun Hill. 6 brilliant strange lights flew over, divided into yellow, cyan, red, green, orange, blue, 6 colors shrouding together. The last 7 strange lights converged into the dazzling ancient sword Zhu Xian in Dao Xian's hand. Heaven and earth changed color. Thunder rumbled. A deafening thunder exploded in the mid-air. The violent wind blew fiercely. The crowd's countenance did not change. The sand and stones on Tongtian Peak flew away. Dust flew up. The 7 strange lights flowed unceasingly. Above the resplendent Zhu Xian ancient sword, slowly appeared a glistening 7-colored energy sword, constantly growing bigger And at the same time from this main sword, different colored energy swords continuously separated. More and more, in a moment it filled the sky, illuminating the entire Tongtian Peak with 7 colors. Incomparably beautiful. Taoist Song Song's body trembled slightly, quietly moaned, and said, Zhu Xian sword formation, Zhu Xian sword formation. Right now, God of Poison and Samyao Fairy also flew back. Taoist Song Song's face was pale, said, This formation was created by Qing Yun founding ancestor Qing Zi, and was also repaired by Qing Yi founding ancestor for 100 years, using the ancient sword Zhu Xian to activate it. Its power is unimaginable. We better retreat quickly. Ghost King's countenance changed, but Yangzi was already angry. Nonsense. No matter how powerful he is only one person and one sword only. What can he do? Taoist Song Song shook his head with a bitter smile, urgently turned to God of Poison and said, Sect Head, this Zhu Xian sword formation is activated by the mysterious incantation power. It is already extremely powerful. When our Qing Yun sect was first established, we relied on this formation to barely hold on. Afterwards, Qing Yi founding ancestor came into being. With his talent, he gathered Qing Yun Hill's 7 mountain peaks, thousands of years of strange malevolent spiritual energy, and then used the number 1 wondrous sword Zhu Xian Supreme Sword Spirit as the medium to forge it. It has the marvelous power to split the heavens and break the earth. We must not use force against it. God of Poison's countenance changed, but to say that looking at this Zhu Xian sword formation, which he had never seen before, he would let the duck that was almost in his hands fly away. No matter what, he could not immediately make this decision. Needless to say, Yangzi, who was beside, his face was filled with unwillingness. Only Ghost King stomped his feet, made a prompt decision, and said, This formation's power is too great. We cannot use force against it. Go. Yu Yangzi and God of Poison, even Samyao Fairy were stunned. We're about to argue, but in this moment of hesitation, that dazzling Zhu Xian sword formation in the sky had already changed. That 7-colored sword energy above the ancient sword Zhu Xian was obviously the main sword of this formation. Right now, it had already become incomparably huge, lying in the firmament. Even the huge beast water unicorn seemed to be incomparable to it. As for the single-colored energy swords that filled the sky, it was even more densely packed, like clouds and mist. Looking at it made one's heart palpitate. This was a rare spectacle, but it didn't make people excited at all. There was only a burst of killing intent and coldness. Reverend Daoxian, who was on top of the water unicorn, his body faintly swayed, at the same time, as if chanting a spell. His right hand waved the ancient sword Zhu Xian. His left hand made a hand seal, his fingers like a sword slashed downwards. On the ancient sword Zhu Xian, a burst of light flashed. The next moment, innumerable energy swords in the sky, carrying with them an incomparably swift and fierce force, charged down, straight towards the evil faction people. The swords fell like rain, the heaven and earth austere. Innumerable evil faction people raised their weapons to resist, but that energy swords seemed to be indestructible, mercilessly pierced downwards. Those with slightly weaker skills were immediately struck deep into the ground, blood splattering. On Tongtian Peak, immediately ghostly wails and wolf howls, miserable cries lingered incessantly. Innumerable broken limbs and minced meat splattered. It was really a bloody scene, like hell. This scene, even Qing Yun's sect and Tianyin Temple people's countenances changed slightly. Tianyin Temple Efasiong lowered his head slightly, softly chanted. The evil faction, 4 great sect leaders' countenances changed greatly. In a blink, the surrounding people under this unimaginable formation, almost all of them were injured. And looking at this Zhu Xian sword formation, swords falling like rain, that 7-colored main sword in the sky continued to split out more and more single-colored energy swords. The area it enveloped became wider and wider, almost surrounding the entire Tongtian Peak. Ghost King waved his hand to block one of the incoming energy swords, felt his body shaking greatly. The spiritual energy contained in the energy swords seemed to be endless. It seemed like it was really like what Taoist Song said. After absorbing the spiritual energy of Qing Yun Hill's 7 peaks, it was really not something a human could withstand. Moreover, this was only a single-colored energy sword. If that terrifying 7-colored main sword attacked, most likely everyone would die, without a burial ground. Among the 4 great sect leaders, Ghost King had always been resourceful. At this critical moment, Ghost King's thoughts turned quickly. Suddenly, he discovered Reverend Daoxian's body in the sky was swaying incessantly. Obviously, it was extremely strenuous. He anxiously shouted, "Everyone, that old thief Daoxian is seriously injured and unable to fully control this formation. We will immediately join forces and attack one direction." Initially, the evil faction people were in a mess, almost relying on their instincts to block the life-taking sword rain falling from the sky. Right now, abruptly hearing Ghost King shout, without hesitation. With Ghost King as the leader, almost all the evil faction experts on Tongtian Peak flew up and charged towards the easternmost direction, where the single-colored energy swords had the least. Along the way, miserable cries incessantly. The life-taking energy swords in the sky, like a demon's hideous grin, splashed up a terrifying yet beautiful flower of blood in the firmament. Qing Yun's sect and Tianyin Temple people were all stunned. They actually forgot to block the evil faction people. But even if they remembered, most likely they also did not have the strength. In this sky full of falling swords like rain, if they moved recklessly, most likely they would be the first to be injured in this sword rain. Finally, after leaving behind close to 100 corpses, several evil faction experts dashed out from the easternmost direction. The 4 great sect leaders, including Taoist Song, all of them were injured, but in the end they still managed to escape. The sky full of swords rain finally slowly weakened and slowly stopped. Innumerable scattered flower of blood quietly fell, turning into a ghastly bloody scene, shrouding Tongtian Peak in a sea of blood. The energy swords in the sky slowly disappeared. Reverend Daoxian followed the water unicorn, slowly descended. Tianbui and the rest then came to their senses and immediately went up to receive him. But they had just caught Reverend Daoxian. Without waiting for them to say a word, Reverend Daoxian's body tilted, fell into Tianbai's arms and fainted. Chapter 156. Everyone was in a mess. Quickly helped Reverend Daoxian into the Crystal Hall. But right now in the Crystal Hall, it was already dilapidated. More than half of the originally majestic building had collapsed, broken rocks, and wood everywhere. Tianbui and the rest let the young disciples quickly tidied up an empty space, drag a chair from the side, let Reverend Doyle-Shun sit down. The surrounding elders, whatever elixirs they had, took them out. Wished they could let Reverend Doyle swallow it. After a moment, Reverend Doyle-Shun's body moved. With a long sigh, slowly woke up. Tianbui and the rest looked at Reverend Daoxian's pale face, especially that wound on his abdomen. The coagulated blood stains, without knowing when, had expanded several times. Almost dyed the entire Taoist Roblack. Could not help but looked worried. Reverend Daoxian was obviously heavily injured. After he woke up, he could not even speak immediately. Tianbui quickly gave him 3 of the Dahuangdan that he had carefully refined. After a while, the medicine started to take effect. Reverend Daoxian's complexion then improved a little. The surrounding elders and disciples gathered around. Bei, Sha Danan, and Anan also arrived. Seeing Reverend Doyle-Shun was so heavily injured, their faces turned pale. After a moment, Xavion, Kaheo, and the rest also rushed back. Reverend Doyle-Shun recovered a little, opened his eyes, saw Tianbui, and the rest were looking at him with worry. He forced a laugh, said, "I can still hold on. Nothing serious." Tianbui and the rest then heaved a sigh of relief. Some of them remembered the legendary ancient sword Zhu Xian, but saw Reverend Doyle-Shun's hands were empty. There was no trace of Zhu Xian, and outside the Crystal Hall, the spiritual beast Water Kirin did not return to the pool, but lay there, but near it there was no trace of Zhu Xian. Reverend Doyle-Shun slowly looked around. His face changed slightly, saw the surrounding Jadian disciples, almost more than half, said in surprise, "After I left here, how are the casualties?" Tian Bui, who was standing nearest to him, hesitated for a moment, quietly said, "Head Shi Xiang, you better recover first." Reverend Doyle cut him off. "Quickly say it." Tian Bui paused for a moment, turned and looked around, as if to confirm again, then quietly told Dao Xian about the casualties. In this battle, Qing Yun's sect really suffered heavy casualties. Under the evil faction's siege, 14 of the 25 elders died, 4 or 5 were seriously injured, including the 7 branch heads, other than sect head Reverend Dao Xian. Dragon Head Valley Taoist Song Song betrayed. Sunrise Valley Head Shang Zhongliang. Sunset Valley Head Taoist Tian Yun unfortunately died. The remaining Tian Bui and Return of the Wind Valley Zheng Shuchong also looked weary, covered with injuries. Only Small Bamboo Valley Master Shuiwe, because she was escorting Tian Yin Temple Master Pu home and the others, was not seriously injured. Reverend Daoxian's body swayed, almost unable to hold on. The strength that Qing Yun's sect was proud of in the past, in this battle, was almost completely lost. Tian Bai's face was also filled with grief and indignation. Quietly said, "Head Shi Xiang, such a blood feud. We must take revenge, just that right now your health is more important. You must not be too sad." Dao Xian heaved a long sigh, closed his eyes and stamped his feet, said, "I, Dao Xian, have let down Qing Yun's sect's generations of ancestors." His voice was bleak, unspeakable pain. Everyone heard it. For a moment they were all silent. At this moment, on the ruins, a piece of wood suddenly fell. A head poked out from the corner of the ruins. Everyone was startled, looked carefully, couldn't help but be startled. That person was actually that Wang Er-shu who had been crazy for many years, did not know when he ran into this crystal hall. And in that earth-shattering battle, just now, no one knew where he was hiding. This time he just crawled out like that, covered in dust, covered in dirt. But looking at his expression, he did not seem to be very afraid, smiling foolishly. At this moment, Sha Danan and Bei, who were standing at the side, walked over at the same time. After all, their relationship with Wang Er-shu was not shallow. Pulled him aside, Bei examined him. Sure enough, other than a few abrasions, he was actually safe and sound. This luck was actually stronger than countless Jadian people whose cultivation was thousands of times higher than him. Both of them let out a sigh of relief, looked at each other. Their eyes had a look of luck. Sha Danan's mood had already calmed down a little, like the vicious energy in his body, after Master Vasp Kalo left, especially after the battle between him and the Falcon black-clothed man at the back of the mountain, had gradually calmed down. Thinking of that, he seemed to have thought of something. His eyes unconsciously looked to the other side, saw Anan, who had just witnessed his vicious energy. At this moment, her face was as dark as water, standing there without a word, not knowing what she was thinking in her heart. The Falcon people fought with their lives to open a bloody path, rushed out of Retribution sword formation launched by Master Doyle Shun, escaped down Peak of Widows. At the foot of Jadian Hill, Master Vim was the first to calm down, shouted to stop the people who were still in shock. The 4 factions once again did a head count. After a moment, Master Vim, God of Poison, Yuyong Zi, and Samuel Fairy walked together, looked at each other without saying a word. Jadian suffered heavy injuries, but the Falcon were not having an easy time either. Ever since the Falcon's great defeat 100 years ago, the Falcon people have been working hard. Until today, the total strength of the Falcon, the 4 factions, had already surpassed any one of the Good's 3 big sections. Unexpectedly in today's battle, not to mention Reverend Dao Xian activating the Zhu Xian sword formation. First at the Crystal Hall, the number of people who perished together with the Qing Yun sect elders were already more than 10. After that, there were even more who died under the Zhu Xian sword formation. The 4 big sects all suffered many casualties. The losses were huge. Right now, because of Master Vaskalo's special identity, he also walked over and stood together with them. Yuyong Zi's character was arrogant, also angry at the casualties of his faction. He looked at him coldly, turned and walked away, not giving him any face at all. Master Vasp Kalo's countenance changed slightly. Instead, Master Vim was shrewd. His manners were still good. He actually laughed and said, "Master Vasp Kalo, Your Jadian strength is really unfathomable. This retribution sword formation even has supernatural abilities. Impressive, impressive. Master Vask Kalo shook his head, spoke to Master Vim. Master Vim, I'm afraid you still don't know. The retribution sword formation just now. I'm afraid only half of its power was unleashed. What? Samuel Fairy, who was standing beside, exclaimed. Master Vasp Kalo glanced at her. Suddenly his mind was shaken. That beautiful lady's skin was like frost. Just now, during the great battle, she was expressionless, but her attacks were fierce. But looking at her now, he suddenly discovered that under that frosty expression, there was a trace of seductiveness, captivating one's soul. For a moment he was stunned. Cough, cough. God of Poison suddenly coughed twice. Master Vaskalo, after all had cultivated for many years, immediately came to his senses, realized that this Samuel Fairy, as Hehuan's sect leader, indeed had seductive skills, and without leaving any traces, definitely not an ordinary glamorous lady. Immediately he did not dare to look at Samuel Fairy. Only said, although I have never seen Retribution Sword Formation unleashed before, but Jadian's ancient records had recorded that when Qin Yi Founder was at his peak, fighting against the evil sect. Fighting against the holy sect. Unleashed Retribution Sword Formation. Other than the huge 7-colored main sword that stretched across the firmament, the rest of the 6-colored swords were neatly arranged according to the positions of the 6 mountain peaks, and the range was so wide, it completely surrounded the entire Jadian mountain range's 7 big peaks. And the sword rain's power was so great. It is not something that we can barely defend against today. Master Vim was silent for a moment, heaved a long sigh, sighed, and said, This Qin Yi Founder of yours is really amazing. God of Poison frowned, said, which means Retribution Sword Formation's power is so great, I'm afraid we will not be able to break it in our lifetime. Master Vim shook his head. A smile surfaced on his face, said, I don't think so. God of Poison and the rest looked over, said, Why? Ghost King Old Brother, what do you think? Master Vim indifferently said, looking at today's battle, firstly, although Dao Xian could control the Zhu Xian ancient sword and activate Retribution Sword Formation, but it was obviously strained, Retribution Sword Formation's power was greatly reduced. Secondly, this Retribution Sword Formation's power is so great, the amount of essence and spiritual power it consumes. How would it be ordinary? I am sure that Dao Xian's old injuries will definitely relapse. Even if he does not die, he will be half dead. That's right. This voice of agreement was not made by God of Poison and the rest. It was Yang Zi who walked back again. After hearing those words, he could not help but speak out. But God of Poison's old eyes looked at Ghost King. His countenance suddenly changed, said, Ghost King, old brother, don't tell me you're thinking of... Ghost King resolutely said, That's right, I am indeed going back to Qingyun. Right now, it is Qingyun's sect since Qinyi, the most vulnerable moment in 1,000 years. If we do not take this opportunity to get rid of this great threat, when will we be? And Qingyun's sect would definitely not expect us to just charge out of the death trap. Actually dare to attack again. It is also a surprise. We will definitely achieve a complete victory. The surrounding evil faction people, for a moment, were all dumbfounded. Even God of Poison, who had seen countless of the world, was also stunned by Ghost King's words. Ghost King looked around, energetically said, Today is the best time to wipe out our holy sect's 100 years of humiliation. All of you in front of Holy Mother Ming Wang throne, make a solemn vow with me. Why don't we fight with all our might today? The evil faction people looked at each other. These people naturally were not cowards, but just a moment ago, they had just escaped with their lives on Qingyun Hill, and now, in a blink of an eye, they wanted to attack again. Ghost King's courage, or should it be said that he completely disregarded life and death, it was really hard to accept. After a long while, no one made a sound to reply. Ghost King's countenance gradually turned ugly. Finally shook his head and sighed, said, Such a great opportunity, all of you, After speaking, he heaved a long sigh. His face looked like he was disheartened and lazy, slowly walked back to where his Ghost King's sect people were. Qing Long, Yu Ji, and the rest came up. Qing Long was about to say something. Ghost King smiled bitterly, quietly said, Not enough to plan, not enough to plan on. After speaking, he sighed and said, "Forget it, we will talk about it in the future. Today we shall call a day, we will return to the mountain." Where is Bai Yao? Once the words were spoken, Qing Long and Yuji's body shook. Yuji's face was covered with a black veil. Her expression could not be seen, but from her voice, it was obvious she was greatly shocked. Said, "That time in Crystal Hall, we were fighting with Qing Yun's sect. Bai Yao told both of us to go and find you. Don't tell me." Chapter 157. Master Vim's face changed, hurriedly said, "I have not seen her since we went up the mountain." Qing Long exclaimed, "Is she still on Mount Jadian?" On Master Vim's forehead, beads of sweat appeared, then resolutely said, "Yao Er is my flesh and blood. I cannot abandon her. I will go to Mount Jadian now." Qing Long hurriedly said, "Head, you cannot. This is really." Master Vim's eyes flashed. Thousands of thoughts passed through his mind. Suddenly turned, loudly said to God of Poison and the Falcon people, "Everyone, I have decided to wipe out our holy faction's 100 years of shame. Our Vim sect would rather be smashed to pieces. Also, do not disappoint Holy Mother and Wisdom King. Right now, Jadian's dead, wounded. Head Doyle Xian is even more seriously injured. Definitely cannot cast Retribution Sword formation. Our Vim sect will kill our way back to Mount Jadian now. If we can succeed, it is because of Holy Mother and Wisdom King's protection. If we are outnumbered, then let us die at Mount Jadian. In the afterlife, we will pay our respects to Holy Mother and Wisdom King. Then we will have a clear conscience." Then, Master Vim did not look at them, flew up first, headed towards Mount Jadian. Qing Long and Yuji looked at each other, and immediately followed closely behind. Following which the Ghost King sect disciples did not speak much and follow behind, leaving behind the dumbstruck God of Poison and the rest of the evil faction people, standing dumbstruck like wooden chickens. After a long while, God of Poison and the rest regained their senses, but without waiting for them to speak, they heard the evil faction disciples behind them. Gradually clamoring noises arose. God of Poison and the rest secretly groaned in their hearts, turned around, and saw that most of the evil faction disciples had indignant expressions on their faces. On Mount Jadian's peak of widows, a heavy atmosphere shrouded. A group of people surrounded Master Doyle Xian, comforting him. Bei and Sha Danan stood at the side, helping Uncle Awang tidy up his clothes, patted off the dust on his body. Uncle Awang seemed to have some impression of them, stood there motionless, let them do whatever they wanted, but his eyes were only looking at Water Kirin, laughing foolishly. Sha Danan looked at him, his heart sour, couldn't help but remember what happened in the past. Sighed. Bei heard it, touched his heart, felt the same, reached out his hand and patted Sha Danan's shoulder. The two of them looked at each other and saw the sadness in each other's eyes. They were momentarily speechless. At this time, Pu Hong Master and the rest who were escorted to a safe place by Shui Wen Master were also sent back by Shui Wei. But looking at Pu Hong Master's face, it was much better than before. Zhou Yin's although powerful, but compared to Pu Hong Master's great Brahmin wisdom, it was still a far cry. In this period of time, Pu Hong Master had already forced out more than half of the all-strange force. But even so, Pu Hong Master still looked very weak. Someone quickly moved a chair over. Pu Hong Master, with the support of Fei Xiang and Pu Kong, sat beside Reverend Daoxian. Pu Hong Master panted a few times, looked around and saw blood flowing like a river, dead bodies and dilapidated halls everywhere, heaved a long sigh, placed his palms together, and chanted, "Amit Ba." Reverend Daoxian nodded slightly to Pu Hong Master, smiled bitterly, said, "How is Master's injury?" Pu Hong Master shook his head, said, "Old monk will not die yet, but sect head Reverend needs to take care." Reverend Daoxian shook his head and sighed. His eyes looked far away, suddenly landed on Sha Danan, who was standing outside. As if remembering something, turned to Tian Belize and said, "Tian Shitty, ask your disciple Sha Danan to come over." Tian Belize's face changed, but did not dare to disobey. Turned and said, "Lao Chi, come over. Sect head Reverend has something to say to you." Everyone was surprised, especially the Bamboo Valley disciples. Sha Danan was even more shocked, but his master's order could not be disobeyed, could only bite the bullet and walked over. After a moment, everyone spread out. Sha Danon stood alone in front of Reverend Daoxian, quietly said, "Sect head." Reverend Daoxian looked at him for a long while, quietly said, "Until now, you still refuse to tell me your secret?" Sha Danon's body shook, felt everyone's eyes were focused on him. Some were concerned, some were despising, but most of them were puzzled. Reverend Daoxian sighed, slowly said, "Sha Danon, after you entered our Jadian, did Jadian mistreat you in any way?" Sha Danon immediately shook his head, said, "Sect head Reverend, no, there is no such thing. Master and Shenyang are extremely good to me." When he said that, Tian Belise's body shook. The expression on his face was extremely complicated. But Sha Danon's face was extremely painful. Two thoughts were fighting in his mind, said, "But disciple really have difficulties. I cannot speak." Suddenly, a loud roar shook the entire place. Like thunder, startled everyone. Sha Danon involuntarily took a step back, looked at that person, and was immediately shocked. The person who roared was not a Jadian person, but one of Skysong Temple's 4 holy monks, Pokong. Pokong was ranked the lowest among Skysong Temple's 4 holy monks. His temper was the most intense. When he was young, he subdued demons. With his Buddhist treasure golden Buddha bowl, he killed countless evildoers. Later, as he grew older, his understanding of Buddha deepened, then gradually lived in Skysong Temple. Today, during the Jadian bloody battle, Poku began a massacre. With his unfathomable Buddhist cultivation, he battled against the falcon. His monk robe was stained with blood. He did not look like a Buddhist monk at all. He was more like a demon from hell. No wonder Sha Danon and others were shocked. This time, Skysong Temple's people came to Mount Jadian with the intention of denouncing. Skysong Temple's supreme incantation, Fawn Wisdom, was learned by a little Jadian disciple. How could that be? At this moment, he looked at Sha Danon stuttering. His heart was angry, plus today's massacre. His mind was in a mess. He could not help but let out a Buddhist lion's roar. Sha Danon was stunned for a moment by his thunderous voice. Before he could recover, Uncle Wong, who was standing next to Bei and smiling foolishly at the water Kirin, was startled, turned his head, and looked at them. A ferocious monk, covered with blood stains, angrily stared at Sha Danon, like a man-eating demon. In the crystal hall, it was instantly silent. Suddenly, a heart-wrenching and lung-splitting miserable cry in this dilapidated crystal hall screamed out in fear. Wang Ershu's face was drained of all color, and his entire face was deathly pale. His entire body started to tremble, and he pointed at Pu Kong while trembling and screamed, "Ghost! Ghost! Ghost! Ghost!" This voice was so shrill, although it was broad daylight, but in the hall, everyone felt a chill at the same time. Even Pu Kong, who had been furious just a moment ago, was now shocked by Uncle Wang Ershu. Flustered, he hurriedly tried to explain himself. What did you say? How am I? What the hell am I?" However, it was as if Wang Ershu had been bewitched. His entire body was trembling with all his might. Beside him, Lin Jingyu tried his best to comfort him, but to no avail. Wang Ershu's entire body was slowly shrinking, and he actually did not dare to take another look at Pu Kong. His eyes were tightly shut, and it was obvious that he was extremely frightened. "Ghost, he killed people. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. Suddenly, a haze silently shrouded this place. Sha Danon and Bei's body stiffened at the same time, especially Sha Danon. Deep in his eyes, there seemed to be a faint red light. Being stared at by everyone, Pokong angrily said, "I don't even know this person. What are you all looking at?" Bei slowly let go of Bei's hand, walked to Sha Danon's side. Without looking, he knew that Sha Danon was the same as him. Tried to control himself, but the heavy breathing already revealed the excitement in their hearts. "Why said it was you?" Bei slowly asked, word by word. His face was as scary as Sha Danon's. The difference was his eyes were filled with hatred, but there was still a hint of sobriety. Pokong angrily said. How would I know? He is only a madman. Sha Danan and Bei's countenance changed at the same time. Most of the Jadian people also frowned, but at this moment, suddenly a Buddha's name, Puhong Master, who was sitting behind Pokong, suddenly opened his mouth. His voice was filled with pain, whispered, Umitba, sowing evil, reaping evil, sin, sin. Once the words came out, the whole place was silent. Pokong's body was like a wooden block. After a long while, he slowly turned around, facing Puhong Master, said bitterly, Xixiang, what did you say? Puhong Master's face was pale, not knowing whether it was because of his body's injury or because of the guilt in his heart. He closed his eyes, whispered, Fezan. Ever since Bei's illness suddenly acted up, Fezan's face was pale, his body shook, said, Disciple is here. Puhong Master slowly said, No need to hide. Tell them, Shitty did wrong that year. Today we must not wrong this Zhang benefactor again. There was a roar in Sha Danan's mind. There was a faint roar in his mind, like grabbing his heart. Fezan slowly walked forward, looked at the countless stunned faces, then landed on Bei and Sha Danan, finally stopped on Sha Danan. That year, it was indeed our Skysong Temple people who killed all the villagers of Grass Temple Village at the foot of Mount Jadian. What? In a short moment, innumerable horrified, shocked, disbelieving, angry voices like an explosion exploded in Qing Yun Hill Crystal Hall. Even Reverend Daoxian, Tian Bui, these kind of cultured and accomplished masters, could not help but change their countenances, and Bei even pulled out the Dragon Slayer sword. Jade green light rippled. Only Sha Danan's heart suddenly sunk, so deep, so heavy, then a familiar cold feeling, a deep bloody aura, shrouded him. Chapter 158. The angry scolding finally subsided. Fezan did not care about the others, not even looking at the Dragon Slayer in the hand of the furious Bei. His eyes were only looking at Sha Danan, both worried and regretful. Waiting until the crowd had completely quieted down, Fezan slowly continued. That murderer is my third Shu, one of the 4 great holy monks, Master Puji. Once the words were out, there was another commotion. Everyone was completely stunned. Sha Danan's body swayed again. He could not feel anything, as if the whole sky had collapsed, and he was just a very funny and very sad person. The sorrow that was deeply engraved in the depths of his soul, at this moment, seemed to turn into a demon, gnawing at his heart. After sorrow, what do you have left? The fire stick gradually lit up the faint green light, mixed with faint gold. But all of these could not cover that layer of cold red blood light. Never before had it been so intense, as if the bloody stench that had been concentrated in the sinister orb and the soul-absorbing orb for thousands of years, the despair of the innumerable vengeful spirits and dead souls, together surged into his chest. And in the midst of the chaos, Fezan's voice clearly continued. That year, Puji Shu came to Jadian, met Doyle Shun, advised to practice both Buddhism and Taoism together. Perhaps it is possible to solve the mystery of immortality. Unexpectedly was politely refused by head reverend. Doyle Shun startled, then nodded. Yes, there is such a thing. Fezan continued. That day, Puji Shu went down the mountain in disappointment, strolled into Grass Temple Village, saw the sky was already dark, so he spent the night in the broken temple in the village. It was also on that night. His voice suddenly stopped. In the main hall, it was quiet, no sound. Only the sound of Sha Danan's increasingly heavy breathing could be heard. Fezan organized his emotions, calmed his mind, but his eyes kept looking at Sha Danan, said, On that night, Puji Shu suddenly discovered a man in black broke into Grass Temple Village, wanted to kidnap Bei Shidi. Lin Jingyu was stunned. Everyone immediately looked at him. Fa Xiang continued. Puji teacher uncle immediately lent a helping hand. Unexpectedly, that black-attired man had ulterior motives. On the surface, it looked like he was kidnapping, but actually it was to deal with Puji teacher uncle, intending to encroach on Puji teacher uncle's evil sex sinister orb. The crowd was in an uproar. Fa Xiang said, The sinister orb was accidentally found by Puji teacher uncle many years ago in the western Great Marsh. To prevent it from harming the living beings of the world, He used Buddhism true way to seal this evil orb and used Tian'in Temple's precious treasure, jade prayer beads, to suppress it. Just that I don't know how that mysterious black-attired man found out about this. First, he hid a poisonous, seven-tailed centipede in Lin Jr. brother's body to bite Puji teacher uncle. Tian Belize was stunned. Seven-tailed centipede. Could it be Song Song? This time, it was Lin Jingyu's turn to be even paler. Fa Xiang paused, then continued. After that, Puji teacher uncle was poisoned, fought with that person with all his might, finally was heavily injured by that person's Jadian's celestial sword-wield Thunder True incantation. He was almost exhausted, but he finally used great Brahmin wisdom to counterattack and heavily injured him, scaring the black-attired man away. And in this intense battle, Zhang Xiaofan, Zhang Shidi also came to the grass temple. The Jadian people's faces were as ugly as it could be. Fa Xiang continued. After that, Puji teacher uncle knew he was going to die, but his lifelong wish was never fulfilled. It was really hard to accept. And at this moment, he suddenly had a whimsical idea, which was to pass on Tian'in Temple's supreme great Brahmin wisdom to a disciple, and then let this young boy enter Jadian to learn Jadian's Taoism, so that the two schools of Buddhism and Taoism, which are not connected, can be practiced by the same person at the same time. His lifelong wish will also be fulfilled. Master Doyle Shun sneered, said, Puji brother is really powerful, far-sighted, but I don't know why he did not pass it to Lin Jingyu, who is more talented, but instead chose this Zhang Xiaofan. Fa Xiang paused, said, Puji teacher uncle thought, Lin Jr. brother's talent is too good. If he enters Jadian, he will definitely receive much attention from the elders, afraid it will be easily seen through so. The Jadian people looked at each other. Tian Bui shook his head and said, Powerful, powerful. Fa Xiang continued. So, Puji teacher uncle also really liked Zhang Xiaofan's simple heart, so he privately passed on the great Brahmin wisdom, which had never been passed on to outsiders for thousands of years, to Zhang Xiaofan. Then he was afraid that if the sinister orb was still with him, if the black-clothed man returned, it would inevitably fall into the evil hands. So he gave the sinister orb to Zhang Xiaofan. Let him find a cliff where no one knows to throw it away. But Fa Xiang could not help but sigh, said, did not expect Zhang Xiaofan, because of old affection, actually kept this evil orb with him. In the main hall, everyone then saw the mystery. So the origin of sinister orb was like this, and Zhang Xiaofan's great Brahmin wisdom also came from this. At this moment, a pained expression appeared on Fa Xiang's face, slowly said, if it was like this, Puji teacher uncle was just acting recklessly. But no one expected, at this moment, something actually happened. Puji teacher uncle, with a compassionate heart, was willing to suffer the torment of the sinister orb's evil power and also wanted to use his own Buddhist power to suppress this evil thing. Unexpectedly, after a long time, the sinister orb's evil power actually secretly seeped into Puji teacher uncle's soul. Usually Puji teacher uncle had Buddhist power to protect his body. Completely unaware, unexpectedly that day, when he was at his end, just after leaving Zhang Xiaofan and the rest, walked into the village, he suddenly remembered, even if he passed on the Buddhist power to Zhang Xiaofan, but he still might not be able to successfully join Jadian. Fa Xiang's expression was pained. Even his voice was slightly trembling, said, right now, Puji teacher uncle's Buddhist power was greatly reduced, was actually invaded by the evil power, like being possessed by a ghost. He actually thought of killing all the villagers in Grass Temple Village. Then Jade, on account of the orphans, would definitely take these two children in. And so. Lin Jingyu bellowed, finally could not bear it. The Dragon Slayer's sword in his body slashed towards Fa Xiang. Dao Xian anxiously said, quickly stop it. Without waiting for his words, Tian Bui and the rest had already stopped him. Lin Jingyu's face was full of tears, crying bitterly. Under the obstruction of Tian Bui and the rest, he still struggled, hoarsely said, I want to kill all of you. Kill all of you. Tian'in Temple with Pu Kong as the leaders. The monks all lowered their heads, looking ashamed, softly chanting Buddhist names incessantly. Dao Xian was silent for a long time. as if even he needed a lot of mental power to digest this inconceivable truth. After a while, he suddenly spoke to Fa Xiong. Just now you said Puji was at his end. Then this truth. How did you all know? Fa Xiong was silent for a moment, said, Puji Shirshu once befriended a strange person, obtained a strange medicine, 3 days must-die pill. After taking this medicine, no matter how heavily injured you are, within 3 days, it can arouse all of your body's potential, save your life, but after 3 days, even if your injuries are healed, you will still die. Puji Shirshu took this strange medicine and finally returned to Tianyin Temple within 3 days, explained the cause and effect to my master Puhong Master in detail. I was serving my master at that time. I also heard the matter. Puji Shirshu has now completely awakened, regretted the sin that day. 10,000 deaths could not make up for it, finally cried bitterly, and passed away. Fa Xiong stared deeply at Sha Danan, slowly said, This is what happened. All these things is our Tianyin Temple Puji Shirshu's fault, has nothing to do with Sha Danan, Zhang Shidi. Please, Jade and Shirshu, please do not blame him. Master Duxian sighed slightly, let out a long breath, was about to speak. Suddenly in the quiet hall, a low, sad laughter sounded. Blame? Who is going to blame me? The laughter was strange and cold, with endless hatred. Sha Danan, who was panting heavily with his head down, slowly raised his head. That pair of blood-red eyes stared at Fa Xiong with a bone-chilling coldness. Fa Xiong frowned tightly, said quietly, Zhang Shidi, you need to take care of your body. Let the past be the past. The future is still long. You, go, die. Suddenly, Sha Danan spat out these 3 words from between his teeth. Everyone was shocked. Sha Danan seemed to have turned into another person. Murderous, the muscles on his face twisted, extremely ferocious. At a distance, Uncle Wong suddenly screamed again, Ghost, ghost. Another ghost came, and this time his finger was pointing at Sha Danan. Everyone was shocked. Puhong Master did not care about his serious injury, suddenly stood up. The fire stick in Sha Danan's right hand shone brightly. Sinister orb like it was reborn, green light brightened, mixed with the black energy of absorbed soul stick, shrouded Sha Danan. Even his face began to blur. Fa Xiong cried out, Zhang Shidi, quickly throw away that evil stick. You're already invaded by the evil energy. Ha 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 ha. Sha Danan laughed bitterly, his voice shrill. What righteous, what justice. All of you have always been lying to me. I have supported myself for my whole life. Even if I die, I will keep a secret, but what am I? He opened his arms, shouted to the sky, What am I? This shrill voice echoed between heaven and earth, moved people's soul, made people cry. Everyone's face changed. Fa Xiong flew up, said hurriedly, Zhang Shidi, quickly give it up, or else you will fall into the demonic path, doomed eternally. Sha Danan looked to the sky, did not notice Fa Xiong was coming. Everyone held their breath, watching Fa Xiong was about to catch the fire stick. But in midair, a shout came, a white light came from the side. Fa Xiong was caught off guard, grunted in midair, and flew back. Everyone was surprised. A green shadow flashed. Bailu appeared in front of Sha Danan. Facing the countless of righteous masters, she was not afraid. Her eyes were slightly red, clearly sad for Sha Danan. She did not care about others, turned and grabbed Sha Danan's hand, said hurriedly, Xiao Fan, come with me. These people are all beasts in human face. They are all trying to harm you. Sha Danan answered dizzily. But the woman in front of him, without knowing why, in this lonely moment, she was the only person he could believe in. He couldn't help but hold her gentle hand and followed her. But how could the righteous masters allow them to act so presumptuously? Especially after a moment, many of them recognized Bailu was the only daughter of Falcon Vim faction's lord. They immediately exploded. Today, Jadian had countless of casualties, all because of the Falcon. They had a blood feud with the Falcon. It will not end until one of them is dead. Someone had already blocked the way. Some even shouted out. They began to doubt if Shah Danon really had any relation with the Falcon. Anan, Kevern, and others were pale. Hedi and others tried to explain that Shah Danon was just fighting with the Falcon. But the voice was so weak, it was drowned by the angry people. After a moment, the righteous people in the hall surrounded the young man and woman in the middle. Shah Danon's blood-red eyes were wide open. His body was shaking. He could not stop laughing. His mind was filled with the bloody scene, but it was completely blank. His life's faith, belief, was completely destroyed today. Bila was much calmer than him. She held Shah Danon's hand tightly, stood together with him, whispered, "Shao Fan, don't be afraid. Even if I die, I will be with you." Shah Danon was surprised. His mind suddenly became sober for a moment. But at this moment, a loud shout came, "Who dares to harm my daughter?" With a swoosh, the figure of Vim King appeared in Crystal Hall. Everyone was stunned, instantly shocked. After a moment, Azure Dragon, Yuji, and other Vim King appeared, surrounded Shah Danon and Bailu in the middle. Ghost King looked around. Right now, with Ghost King's sect strength, there was indeed a gap between Qingyin's sect and Tianyin Temple, but he did not show any fear, clasped his hands behind and stood, looking around contentedly, turned and smiled at Baiyao, said, "Yao, you bring Shao Fan and leave first." Bila nodded, was about to step out. But this kind of action of turning a blind eye to the righteous, how could she succeed? And Shah Danon's identity was very special. Jade, Sky Song Temple, these two big factions, no matter what, they could not let him go. Master Doyle Shun said angrily, "Stop them." Once he shouted, the righteous masters who could not hold back immediately surrounded them. In an instant, the broken Crystal Hall became a mess of fighting again. But the situation was completely reversed. It was the righteous attacking Vim King. Soon, Vim King was at a disadvantage. Bailu was still holding Shah Danon's hand tightly, worriedly looking around. But Vim King was still smiling, calmly watching the situation. The pressure on the surrounding good faction people became greater and greater. Ghost King's sect, and a dozen of them were already pressed into a small circle. Looking at the precarious situation, unexpectedly at this moment, a sharp whistle was heard outside the Crystal Hall. Strange lights flashed randomly. The next moment, miserable cries were heard incessantly. The righteous were surprised. After a moment, they saw figures flying. It was God of Poison, Yu Yang, and Samuel Fairy leading the other three Falcon factions to help. The evil faction experts all joined the battle. The situation turned around in a flash. God of Poison unhurriedly walked over and stood there, looking at their Ghost King with a face of gratification. His gaze looking at the battle in front of him. His face also had a smile, but his mouth said in a low voice, "Old brother, consider yourself ruthless." Vim King smiled, said, "Old Senior risked everything for our holy faction, took great risk. Your name will be passed down in history, be praised by the holy faction's disciples." God of Poison smiled bitterly, glared at him, scolded quietly. "Bullshit." With the arrival of the Falcon forces, Jade was already heavily injured. Although Tian Bui and others tried their best to hold on, but they were outnumbered. Immediately, they were pushed back. The situation was getting critical. Reverend Doyle Shun looked at the scene. His eyes were like spitting fire. Within one day, the sacred and inviolable Jadian Hill was killed by these Falcon people. It was really the greatest humiliation since Jadian was founded. But the most important thing was the predicament before him. It was like at this moment, he made up his mind and raised his arm. The evil faction's four big sects leaders had yet to join the fight, their eyes almost all staring at this Reverend Dao Xian. One look, and they knew that this old thief was going to risk his life to activate the Zhu Xian sword formation again. How could they let him have his way? The next moment, four figures like lightning shot out, at the same time pounced towards Reverend Dao Xian. And at this moment, as if it was summoned by something, the spiritual beast water unicorn, which had been lying outside the Crystal Hall, suddenly roared loudly and charged in with ferocious momentum. This kind of ancient, huge beast, its power was definitely not below any cultivator. This attack was swift and fierce. It was not a joke to be hit. Vim King and the rest were blocked by it. In a blink, Water Unicorn had already reached Reverend Doyle Shun. Chapter 159. It prostrated beside Reverend Daoxian, opened its huge mouth and spat out an object. Reverend Daoxian stretched out his hand to receive it. The evil faction people were shocked, looked over and saw that it was indeed a long sword, but right now it did not have any luster. As if it was made from some kind of strange stone, the sword body and hilt were one. It looked like an ordinary stone sword, and indistinctly on the sword body, lines overflowed, seemed to be a little worn out. There were even faint cracks on the sword body. So this Zhu Xian ancient sword was actually like this, and hidden in the water unicorn's mouth. It was even more unexpected. After a moment, when this Zhu Xian ancient sword landed in Reverend Daoxian's hand, a sudden change occurred. In that instant from that ancient sword body, an incredible scorching white light surfaced. In just a moment's work, it completely enveloped the entire crystal hall. Everyone was shocked for a moment. One after another stopped. But in the light, Reverend Daoxian's body swayed a few times again. Ghost King and the rest, with their knowledge and experience, almost without saying anything, immediately pounced forward. Tian Bui and the rest shouted angrily, but it was already too late to help. Unexpectedly, although Reverend Daoxian's body was weak, his left and right hand supporting the water unicorn's body, his right hand holding Zhu Xian's sword, waved forward. Instantly, the white light, like a huge wave, surged over, like toppling the mountains and overturning the seas. God of Poison and the rest exerted their strength together. The two collided. A loud sound was heard. The crystal hall, which was originally half destroyed, right now, even the remaining dilapidated walls also collapsed with a loud rumble, dust flying everywhere. Ghost King and the rest involuntarily took a step back. The four of their faces changed color. This Zhu Xian ancient sword's power was really unimaginable. But even so, Reverend Daoxian, who was enveloped by the Zhu Xian sword light, with a puff, a big mouthful of blood spurted out, but he seemed to disregard everything, force himself to float up to the water unicorn's body. The water unicorn gave a loud roar, bared its fangs and brandished its claws, flew up to the sky. Between heaven and earth, suddenly only that Zhu Xian grand light, glimmering resplendent light, became more and more resplendent. Accompanied by waves of incantations, that brilliant seven-colored energy sword once again appeared in the sky, continuously splitting into single-colored energy swords, brilliant lights, and vibrant colors. The people of the evil faction turned pale. The god of poison fiercely stamped his foot and anxiously said, "This formation's power is really too strong. We can't fight it with force. Let's retreat first." Although Ghost King looked at Reverend Daoxian's tottering appearance, but he could not understand how this person was able to activate such a powerful formation that consumed a large amount of energy. Just that since this formation was activated, its power would not be a small matter. He did not dare to use the evil faction disciples' lives as a wager. He heaved a long sigh and flew up, signaling his disciples to retreat. Bailu pulled Sha Danan and was about to fly away. Suddenly, a figure flashed in front of her. It was Anan. Aeolian Firmus in her hand was shining with blue light. She said coldly, "Zhang Shidi is from Jadian. Quickly let him go." "How could Bailu let him go?" she said angrily. "You want me to leave him for you to kill? Just kill me first." Without another word, the heart-wrenching flower flew through the air. At that moment, Zhu Xian formation had covered Pika Widows. Heaven and earth were getting dark. People from Vim saw Bailu and Anan were fighting together. They immediately turned back to help. The righteous also joined in. It was a mess again. Sha Danan's heart was an unbearable pain. He could only feel a vicious thought was screaming in his mind. A terrifying but tempting feeling of wanting to kill countless of people filled his mind. The fire stick seemed to follow its master's mind. Red, green, gold light rotated and flowed, but it was obvious that the red light was getting brighter and brighter. Fazan was very anxious. Since the day he met Sha Danan at Kongsang Mountain, because of the secret, he looked at Sha Danan in a new light. Now, he did not want to see Sha Danan fall into the evil faction. He flashed and grabbed the fire stick in Sha Danan's hand. Bailu was very anxious, but she was entangled by Anan and others. She could only call out, "Xiao Fan, careful. But it was like Shah Danon did not hear anything. He let Fezan grab the fire stick. Fezan was overjoyed, but after a moment, his face changed. He felt the vicious energy from the fire stick was coming at him like tide. The honest Shah Danon in front of him suddenly showed a grin, like a devil grin. Ah! Fezan screamed in pain. Shah Danon heavily hit his chest with the fire stick. He flew backward with blood spitting out from his mouth. Shah Danon roared to the sky. His eyes were red. He jumped into the battle and rushed to Bailu's side. The red light of the fire stick brightened, like it was also celebrating, laughed wildly with its master, and rushed to the death and blood. Ainin and others quickly retreated. No matter what, they still could not use their full strength against Shah Danon. But Shah Danon seemed to have completely fallen into madness. His eyes were filled with endless hatred. Each of his moves was fatal. In a moment, he had forced everyone back. Bailu was overjoyed. She pulled Shah Danon and said, "Let's go." Both of them rose into the air and flew out of the hall. At this moment, the sky was filled with energy swords like mountains and seas. Retribution Sword Formation had launched its attack on the Falcons. And this time, Reverend Daoxian seemed to have thrown caution to the wind. Not only the sky full of swords rained down, that enormous seven-colored main sword in the sky was also controlled by an invisible curse power, carrying with it the power to split the sky and earth, rumbled down. This sword formation's main sword, how could its power be ordinary, with one sword attack, instantly within a radius of several zhongs, flesh and blood splattered? Nearly 10 people did not even have the time to cry out before their souls flew out and dispersed. Even when the remaining power reached, Yangzi could not evade in time, and even his left hand was chopped off. With a tragic cry, his body turned into a sharp light like lightning, breaking through the air to escape. At the same time, Master Doyle Shun in the sky was almost exhausted. His body tilted and almost fell off from water Kirin. He managed to hold himself and look down. Most of the Falcons had escaped, but there were still a few of them were still on Peak of Widows. The last one was Shah Danon. Bailu was pulling him and flying in a hurry. Doyle Shun already saw Shah Danon had fallen into the devil's way. When he was fighting with Fezan, Ainin, and others, his attack was ruthless and ruthless. And now his expression was mad. Obviously, he could not be bothered. But this person had Jadian and Sky Song Temple's two great incantations. He also had a rare, evil item in his hand. If he let the tiger return to the mountain, the sin he will cause in the future will be far more than normal Falcons. Doyle Shun sighed in his heart, but his mind had already decided. Even if he will be talked about by the world in the future, he must not let this peerless disaster stay. Master Doyle Shun used the last of his spiritual power. In that instant, all of the colorful swords in the sky shone brightly, especially the main colorful sword of the formation. It enlarged by half, roared, shook the heaven and earth like an ancient god in rage, rushed down, directly hit Shah Danon. Not only the Falcons were shocked, even the righteous, Sky Song Temple and Jadian were all shocked. Tian Belize and Serene were pale. Hede screamed and fainted. Ainin was holding Aeolian Firmus tightly. Her face was pale. Even Aeolian Firmus in her hand was slightly shaking. That giant sword was striking down from the top of his head. Before it reached the ground, it already made a loud sound. The ground around Shah Danon was cracked. The wind was howling, shrouding him in it. It was a sure death situation. Shah Danon's eyes were red. He was shrouded by the invisible sword energy. He could not escape from it. The anger and hatred in his heart could not be suppressed. He watched the terrifying giant sword falling down with endless murderous intent. He opened his mouth and shouted, "Ah, ah." The sound shook the surroundings. Heaven and earth changed color. Only that Zhu Xian's strange sword was like a heartless object that could annihilate the deities and Buddhas, still mercilessly striking towards him. It looked like Zhang Xiaofan was about to become a dead soul under the sword, his body smashed and his bones crushed. Suddenly, the heaven and earth quieted down. Even the Retribution Sword Formation's earth-shattering momentum also stopped its breath. That familiar, gentle, and white hand appeared next to Shawdanan. A faint, clear bell sound pushed him to the side. A voice that had been sleeping for thousands of years quietly rang at this moment. For the beloved lover softly sang, 9 nether spirits, the gods and demons, with my blood and body offer as sacrifice. She stood in the violent wind. Her slightly red eyes looked at Shawdanan. There was a faint smile on her white face. The wind blew her green dress, fluttered, like the most poignant scenery in the world. Shawdanan's heart sank. Suddenly, he opened his mouth and shouted, but was forced back by the strong wind. He jumped towards Bayao like a madman, but was bounced back by the mysterious energy. Red tears came out from his red eyes, flowed down his cheeks. The woman in the wind opened her arms, facing the sword rain, facing the giant sword that took away the power of the heaven and earth. 3 lives and 7 lives forever fall into Yama, only for love, not regret, even in death. The violent wind suddenly changed direction, turned into a giant whirlpool around Bailu. The graceful and beautiful woman was pushed into midair by the violent wind, facing the colorful giant sword. At that moment, she was the only color in the world. After a moment, countless blood-colored mist instantly spurted out from her body, condensing into a sparkling red, jade-like blood wall in front of her. At the same time, 9 faintly discernible wisps of smoke floated out from her fair face, merging into the blood wall. The blood wall instantly boiled like the burning fire of passion, burning with all the passion and despair, burst out an unparalleled bright light, going against the sky, collided with Retribution's main sword. The bright light was so bright, no one could open their eyes. An indescribable, deafening sound shook the entire horizon. The unstoppable Zhu Xian sword flew back. The Qi swords in the sky were in disorder, and on Tongtian Peak, the mountain peak shook violently. Rocks flew everywhere. Numerous huge cracks appeared on the mountain, as if it was being split, as if doomsday had arrived. Vaguely, a slender and sorrowful figure slowly descended from the sky. The world suddenly quieted down. There was only one voice, a heart-wrenching roar, no. Endless darkness shrouded the entire world. He shivered in the darkness, did not dare to move, did not dare to face, did not dare to wake up. But he eventually still woke up. Trembling hands slowly clenched and then released. Slowly, he opened his eyes, as if this also required all of his courage. In an ordinary stone room, the decorations were simple and plain. He slowly got off the bed, not daring to think about anything else. He didn't even look at the fire stick in his hand. As if he had been guided by something, he walked to the door and slowly walked out. Outside was a long tunnel. Many people quietly shuttled back and forth. But no matter who it was, once they saw him, they immediately retreated to the side and lowered their heads. He walked in a daze, as if there was a voice calling him. Very soon, he reached a corner. There was a big stone room. The door was unlatched. At the other end of the corner, a familiar voice was heard. It seemed to be the voice of a person called Qing Long in his memory. Mr. Ghost, you are the world's #1 extraordinary person. Please, for the sake of Holy Mother and Ming Wang, save. Accompanied by a sigh, a deep voice in the darkness said, I am indebted to Ghost King's sect. It is not that I did not try my best. Just that what Miss Biao used was the most tragic, malicious blood poison curse in our holy sect. It is also the infatuation curse that has been passed down since ancient times. This curse stimulates all of the person's essence, blood and flesh with the power of the curse, then absorb the body's 3 souls and 7 spirits to refine, disregarding everything. That is why it has the power to go against the natural order. But the person who uses this curse will definitely have his soul scattered and will never be able to reincarnate. I really have no other way. Qing Long bitterly said, Mr. Ghost, but... That voice cut in. I understand what you want to say. That's right. Miss Biao's unique treasure, Hehuan Bell, indeed at that moment, forcibly absorbed the remaining soul from the 3 souls and 7 spirits that she forced out, guarded in the bell. That's why Miss Body could not be destroyed. But But this kind of soul recovery skill had long been lost for 1,000 years. Only 1,000 years ago in the southern border evil lands, a short-lived black shaman tribe heard of this skill, but they were already extinct. This forgive me for not being able to do anything. Qing Long was speechless, said after a while, but Headmaster did not eat or drink for several days, and now already. Mr. Ghost, he always respected you. Please persuade him. That voice slowly said, Master Vim is too sad. After a long time, he will naturally get better. Qing Long still wanted to say something. Suddenly his body shook. As if he had discovered something, he turned his head to look, only to see that weak and pale figure, step by step walk to the door, and then, as if mustering up his greatest courage, finally walked in. Then there was no more sound. Qing Long lowered his head in silence. In the darkness, there seemed to be a deep sigh of someone. In the stone room, on the white jade platform, a beautiful woman quietly lay there, like sleeping quietly. Her father sat next to her, holding her hand, looking at his daughter with infatuation. Shah Danan stared blankly, silently shed tears. His legs softened, finally could not hold it any longer, sat next to Bailu. That gentle and tranquil face had since become an indelible mark in his life's memory. In the silent stone room, there was a faint sound of crying, sobbing. Why are you so silly? I haven't told you. The person I saw in the ancient well is you. Mount Jadian, Bamboo Height. The night was deep. Anan silently stood on the peak of the mountain, looking far away. The night was cold. The sky was shining with starlight, like mocking the mortals struggling in the mortal world. Footsteps sounded. Her familiar and respectful master's voice came from behind her. Sure. Why are you standing here again? Anan did not say anything. Shui Yu looked at her, suddenly sighed, walked to her side, whispered. You thought of that person again? Anan was silent. Pain suddenly appeared on her face, said, Master, it should not be like this. It should not become like this. Shui Yu also became silent. After a while, she softly said, This is fate, Chura. When you meet him in the future, it will be an irreconcilable enemy. You must remember this clearly. After saying that, she sighed, turned around, and walked away. Only Anan was left standing there. The mountain wind blew. She felt cold. She silently looked far away. With a voice that only she could hear, she quietly said, When I meet him again. The night was cold like water, shined on her lonely figure. Chapter 160. The black clouds circled in the night sky. The sky was so dark that it seemed to press down on the ground, the rain falling from the firmament, in the piercingly cold howling wind, swept across the vast land. In the wilderness, no village could be seen in front and no land at the back. It was boundless all around. Only an ancient path extended from afar and also extended towards the distance alone. In the dark clouds in the night sky, a low thunder sound sounded. The rain between heaven and earth also gradually became heavier. The ground was solemn. Other than the sound of wind and rain in the wilderness, it was pitch black everywhere. Only by the side of the ancient path, a lone lit lamp, revealing some light. This was a small house in the wilderness. The shopkeeper was surnamed Ho, a middle-aged man in his 40s, born in Shaoqi town, which was a day's journey away from here. In this desolate place, beside the ancient path, he built a simple and crude house himself to provide the travelers from south to north a place to rest and drink tea, to earn some hard-earned money. Right now, shopkeeper Ho was sitting behind the counter in his own shop, his ears concentrating on the mournful howling of the wind and rain outside. His brows slightly frowned, gently sighed. Such bad weather. Most likely there would not be any more customers. His small house was situated between Shaoqi town and a large mountain in the west, Kongseng Mountain, that ancient path outside the door. Since ancient times it was a trade route, and also the only way to the big city further east, eastern Xichangyi City. Therefore, from time to time, there would be travelers passing by. Right now, in this stormy night, in this small shop in the wilderness, there were still a few customers quietly sitting in the dark and dusky little house, hiding from the mournful wind and rain outside. Pai Pa. The oil lamp in front of shopkeeper Ho made a light crackling sound, waking this honest, middle-aged man from his drowsiness. The sound of the wind and rain outside the house intensified. The sound of sobbing seemed to be choking. It seemed that this night, the customers would not be able to leave. He thought like that, lifted his head, and looked at the customers in his shop. There were only 5 tables in the simple and crude hut. At this moment, 3 of the tables were occupied by guests. The table in the far corner was occupied by a single man. It was a shadowy spot where the lights could hardly illuminate. The man sat there alone, and even his face was blurry. As for the 2 tables closer to each other, one of them was occupied by an old man with an extraordinary bearing and young girl. The old man had a bamboo pole leaning against the table. There was a piece of cloth on it with the words Immortal Guide written on it. It seemed that he was a fortune-teller of Jianghu. As for the last table, it was the one with the most people. There were a total of 4 people, and the corner behind them was filled with goods. At this moment, there seemed to be a young man cursing the weather in the middle. "All right, that's enough." Among the 4 of them, one of them who looked older shouted at him, turned his head and smiled at shopkeeper Ho, apologetically said, "Shopkeeper Ho, today the wind and rain is heavy. I have troubled you to stay up late with us." Shopkeeper Ho smiled and shook his head. This group of merchants frequently traversed this ancient path and had stopped at his shop many times, so they were considered regular customers. He said, "It's all right. It is normal for me to stay up late. But today, since the sky looks like it is covered by dark clouds, why is Mr. still in a hurry?" That old man was surprised, and then looked at the others, smiled bitterly, and said, "Actually, how would we not know that the weather is not good today, but going out, it is really difficult." Shopkeeper Ho made an ah sound. That old man picked up the teacup in front of him, finished the tea in one gulp, and said, "Shopkeeper Ho, the way of the world now is difficult." Shopkeeper Ho was shocked and said, "What is it?" That old man laughed bitterly and said, 10 years ago, the evil sect which had disappeared for a long time suddenly reappeared and heard that they even had a big battle with the good faction deities at Xinyan Hill. From then on, for these 10 years, not only was the evil sect not destroyed by the good faction, instead it flourished day by day, and everywhere I heard that they were fighting with the good faction. Shopkeeper Ho was silent. That old man sighed and said, "They fight on their own. Us commoners also cannot interfere, but because of his fighting, the world is in chaos. Now thieves are running amok. Robbers are innumerable. We who make a living outside are always on tenterhooks every day, deeply afraid that we will meet strong people, and that's why we hurried on our way. Unexpectedly, we are obstructed by the wind and rain here. Sorry to trouble Shopkeeper Ho." Shopkeeper Ho shook his head and said, "It doesn't matter. You don't have to take it to heart." While he was speaking, suddenly a voice was heard from a faraway corner, indifferently said, "In that case, this Mr. thinks that now the world is in chaos, thieves running amok. It is all because of the evil sect that you mentioned?" That old man was surprised, but before he could speak, the fortune-teller and young lady at the table in front, their eyes also looked towards them. That young lady's eyes were bright, her looks beautiful. There were shallow dimples at the corner of her mouth. She looked lovable. Right now, she suddenly opened her mouth and smiled at that old man, said, "This, sir." That old man looked at her and said, "What is it, miss?" This young lady softly said, "Sir, your face is thin and wrinkled, but the shape of your face is not broken. Although there are many twists and turns in your life, but you are still considered safe. Just that you have a small scar at the Celestial Court 6 fund, lying across your face, blocking your lifeline, wealth line. When you're old, that might be a big calamity. Looking at your age now, why don't you speak less and also cause less trouble?" The merchant's countenances changed. That old man even stood up, stared intently at the old and young, but both of them did not have any reaction, calm and composed. After a long while, that old man's expression was uncertain. He looked around and finally still sat back down, cupped his hands, and said to that young lady, "Many thanks for Mrs. Guidance." After he sat back down, the small shop immediately quieted down. That mysterious man at the corner seemed to have quieted down and did not speak again. Just that this long night was really unbearable. After a long time, the merchants gradually started to chat. In the end, they were talking about that good and evil great battle at Qin Yin Hill 10 years ago. These traveling merchants were only ordinary commoners. Naturally, they had never been to the scene, but this thing called rumor was also born because of this. And those good faction true cultivators had always been mysterious and unfathomable. It was the best topic for the commoners to talk about. As they spoke, a few of the young people's voices gradually became louder. The others also heard and were attracted over. Anyway, at that time, Qin Yun's sect situation was already on the brink of crisis. Luckily, old immortal Daoxian's skills were profound. With a light point of his finger, immediately thunder and lightning fell from the sky, heard that the deafening sound could be heard within 100 miles radius. That was how the evil faction people were repelled. Bullshit! Suddenly a light shout. It was the old man with extraordinary bearing who was sitting at the same table with that young lady. Everyone was shocked and looked at him. That old man said, "If Daoxian is really that powerful, why in a battle at Qin Yin Hill? Qin Yin sect would lose so many people. Even 2 of the 7 branches' leaders died. The other elders and disciples were even more injured and dead. Do you think those evil faction devils are freeloaders?" Everyone was speechless. The young lady beside him frowned, quietly said, "Grandpa, I just told people not to talk so much. Why are you so talkative?" That old man laughed. His original sage-like face suddenly became complacent, quietly said, "Xiao Huan, don't scare me. I've already let you see my fate. Although my life will be wandering, but in my old age I will be lucky. The Lord will live to old age peacefully. Someone will send me off. Hee, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter." That young lady had just taken a sip of tea, almost choked by his words, coughed twice, angrily stared at the old man. That old man was instead complacent, did not take it to heart at all. This one old and one young was the Jianghu fortune teller Zhou Yixian and his granddaughter Xiao Huan. It had been 10 years since the last Qin Yin Hillgood faction and evil faction battle. Xiao Huan had also grown up, became beautiful, but still followed Zhou Yixian to roam the world. Right now, Zhou Yixian seemed to be hooked. He did not care that it was the first time he met them, pulled the stool, and actually sat in the middle of those merchants, started to talk about that Qin Yin battle. Xiao Huan was annoyed, but could not do anything. Zhou Yixian was an eloquent speaker. Moreover, he roamed the world, also relied on his eloquence. His narration was lively, vivid, and lifelike, far better than those few young people. After a while, even shopkeeper Ho could not help but walked over. Everyone gathered together, listening to Zhou Yixian's rampage, talking and laughing about the past. Hearing the exciting part, those few young people exclaimed at the same time. One of them could not help but ask, "Sir, don't tell me you were also there at that time. You know so much about it?" Zhou Yixian was startled, then used his hand to lightly pat his clothes, shook his head and sighed. "These fighting and killing matters, I have never been willing to interfere. Just let those Qin Yun sect juniors do it." Everyone was shocked and immediately felt deep veneration. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a sound was heard. It was Xiao Huan who spat out the mouthful of tea she had just drunk, coughing incessantly. Tanizka glared at her, then turned back, laughing. At this time, a young man beside him said, "Old sir, that last Jadian disciple, surnamed Zhang. What happened? Did he really rebel against Jadian?" Zhou Yixian frowned, pondered for a moment, then shook his head, said, "I am not sure about that. That day, it was a mess. Even that Shah Danan also fainted, then he was captured by the Falcon, then disappeared." The surrounding people sighed. Actually, the secret of Shah Danan's identity was Jadian's and Skysong Temple's big secret. It would not be spread out. But that day when the secret was revealed, there were a lot of people, especially the Falcon, were there. So after a long time, the secret was spread out in the world. But what Zhou Yixian said, it was like he saw it with his own eyes at Mount Jadian's peak of Widow's Crystal Hall. Shopkeeper Ho sighed, said, "Don't know how is that young man now. How is he now?" Suddenly, the voice of the mysterious man sitting at the corner rose again, with a hint of vicissitudes. Zhou Yixian turned his head, looked at the man sitting in the shadow, said, "What, this brother, do you know?" The man was silent for a moment, then slowly said, "Of course I know, but even if you have seen him before, you probably cannot recognize him now." Xiao Huan frowned, said, What happened to him? The man didn't say anything else. He just hid his figure in the darkness. The wind and rain outside the house covered the sky, and the ground seemed to be more mournful. Chapter 161. Kongsing Mountain, Thousand Fangs Ancient Cave. 800 years ago, Evil Sect Senior Elder Blackheart established the golden age of Bloodforger Hall here, commanding the evil sect, awing the world. But now the younger generation disciples were unworthy. This place was desolate and withered, very desolate. And hidden in the depths of the Thousand Fangs ancient cave beside that forsaken abyss, right now, it was already occupied by numerous external enemies. Beside the huge rock with the three big words Forsaken Abyss carved in ancient seal script, the last members of Bloodforger Hall gathered here, their backs leaning against the huge rock, and if they were to retreat a few more steps, it would be the unfathomably deep and dark Forsaken Abyss. And their numbers were actually left with less than 10 people, including Nien Leader, Lu Gao, Wild Dog Taoist, and the rest. All of them were injured, their expressions weary and fearful. On the ground in front of them laid several corpses, several times their number of black-attired men, surrounded them. Without exception, all of them had a skull embroidered on their chests. Nien Leader breathed deeply, forced himself to calm down, opened his mouth to speak, but suddenly discovered that his voice was already hoarse. Various Ghost King sect friends. Our Bloodforger Hall is only a small faction in the Holy Sect. We have never dared to offend Ghost King sect. Don't know why exactly Ghost King Senior want to treat us like this. Humph. A cold snort was heard from among the innumerable black-attired men. A black-attired man with a golden skull embroidered on his chest, completely different from the rest, looked like the leader, faintly said, Nien Leader. Now the situation in the Holy Sect is already very obvious. Ghost King Sect Leader has also sent several letters to you, but you are still like a fence-sitter today dealing with us. Tomorrow you will be worshipping Chongshan Hall. Don't tell me you don't have any respect for Ghost King Sect Leader in your heart. Nien Leader's face turned pale. He knew that in the Holy Sect, with the 4 big branches as the leader, the internal strife was getting more and more desperate by the day. All the small branches attached themselves to them. From time to time, there were rumors of sects being exterminated by mysterious figures. And now, Ghost King Sect suddenly launched a large-scale attack. The strength that he had painstakingly built up in Bloodforger Hall for many years was almost destroyed by them in one fell swoop. And the situation before him was also quite obvious. As expected, that black-attired man sneered and said, Nien Leader, I will tell you one more time. The current Ghost King Sect head has great talent and bold vision. Unifying the Holy Sect is just around the corner. He thinks highly of you. That's why he wants to take your Bloodforger Hall under his banner. You better not fail to appreciate his kindness. Towards the end, his voice was full of threats. Nien Leader's forehead was full of perspiration. Although the situation was clear, his own small Bloodforger Hall, no matter what, it was impossible to defeat Ghost King Sect, but the foundation passed down by the founder. Was it going to be destroyed in his own hands? This decision was not easy to make. The black-clothed man's expression turned cold when he saw Boss Nien's hesitation. He suddenly said, Boss Nien, let me give you a piece of advice. You're lucky that you're facing me right now. But do you know who's leading the attack on Kongsing Mountain? Nien Leader's body trembled. The man in black already sneered and said, You have guessed it too, that's right. It is our Ghost King Sect deputy head, Ghostly. If he's here, all of you will end up. Halfway through his words, suddenly someone beside him coughed softly twice. This black-clothed man's countenance changed, as if he thought of something. His face also turned pale, as if even he had a deep fear towards that name. And at this moment, suddenly a strong stench of blood wafted over, not knowing where it came from, but it suddenly filled the entire huge space. All the black-clothed men of Ghost King Sect immediately straightened their bodies. The leader's face also turned slightly pale, looking carefully, indistinctly, the corner of his eyes twitching slightly. Who was it to actually make him so afraid? Footsteps gradually sounded, as if it was coming from the endless darkness of this abyss, slowly walking out. One step, one blood print. All of the black-clothed men, suddenly like tidewater, separated to two sides, opening up a path. Faint green light, with a faint red blood light, gently rippled in the darkness, unhurriedly moving forward. The Bloodforger Hall people's faces were all deathly pale, devoid of blood. 10 years ago in Ghost King's sect, there was still no ghostly, but there was a rumor in the sect. After the good and evil bloody battle 10 years ago, Ghost King's sect head Ghost King took in a good faction traitor as his own disciple, and even passed down the Holy Sect Classic, Tian Shu's second volume, which was rumored to have fallen into Ghost King's sect's hands. And this ghostly, other than his incredible improvement in skills, his temperament changed even more, his bloodthirst and bloodthirsty to the extent that even the evil faction people were shaken to their core. In recent years, the internal strife in the evil faction was getting more and more tragic by the day, and Ghostly, this simple and honest disciple of Qin Yun's sect, shockingly became Ghost King's sect's #1 general, leading Ghost King's sect disciples to rampage and massacre, exterminating numerous sects. In his hand, a soul-devouring stick. This name was given privately by the evil faction people. Sucked the blood of countless people, in addition to Ghost King's special regard. Very quickly he became a figure who was second only to one in Ghost King's sect. And this person, 10 years ago, these people in Bloodforger Hall had all seen him before. Wild Dog Taoist in the crowd looked over at him. That man who was gradually appearing in the darkness carried that thick blood stench, as if it was emitted from the depths of his body. There were countless people standing in the field, but there was not a single sound. His appearance was still the same as that year. There was no change. The appearance between his brows was still vivid in their minds. Just that wild dog's heart started to palpitate nonstop, as if the person standing in front of him was not a human but a ferocious wild beast. "You all," he unhurriedly spoke his first sentence, his voice steady but with a hint of sternness, reverberated in this place. "Surrender or not?" Countless people stood behind him, but no one went near him. The Bloodforger Hall people looked at each other. Nian leader was drenched in sweat. Even the wounds on his body did not feel anything, but at this moment, suddenly a strange cry was heard in the field. "You go and die." Everyone turned pale. The next moment, beside Ghostly, a sword light suddenly burst out, stabbing towards his lower abdomen, and the assassin's hair was disheveled, his expression frantic and dazed. Both of his legs had actually been chopped off, blood gushing out. Looking at this person, he seemed to be a Bloodforger Hall disciple, seriously injured. In the fear and pain, he finally lost his rationality, crazily shouting and stabbing towards Ghostly. Just that after a moment, a dark green light mixed with bloody red light was emitted from Ghostly's right hand, enveloping this person. The blood stench in the air became heavier. The human body that had become withered fell to the side powerlessly. The Bloodforger Hall people's faces turned even paler. Some of the young disciples' bodies started to tremble. Ghostly's eyes instead gradually glowed with a faint red light. Again slowly said, "All of you, surrender or not?" And that ugly black soul-devouring stick, fire stick, in his hand slowly also lit up. Behind, all of the black-attired men seemed to inhale at the same time, took a step forward at the same time. An unparalleled, terrifying aura surged over like covering the sky and covering the earth, drowning all of the Bloodforger Hall people. Suddenly, a loud cry erupted from the Bloodforger Hall people. "No, don't I surrender." Following this voice, a young disciple ran out, left the Bloodforger Hall people, dashed to the Ghost King sect, but subconsciously he stayed far away from where Ghostly was. Once he started, there was a reaction immediately. The Bloodforger Hall people looked at each other. Occasionally someone would walk out. Nian leader heaved a long sigh. Knowing that the situation was hopeless, he smiled bitterly and said, "Forget it, forget it." Speaking, he walked out from the crowd. The crowd followed behind him and slowly walked to Ghostly. From his bosom, he took out a black palm-sized metal tablet. On it was carved a black heart. With both hands, he presented it to Ghostly, smiled bitterly, and said, "This is Bloodforger Hall's Black Heart command. Bloodforger Hall's 800 years of foundation will be considered finished today." "Nonsense," Just at this moment, suddenly a loud shout, but the voice carried a slight tremble of fear, was heard from behind them. Everyone was taken aback. They turned their heads to look and were surprised to see that there was another person standing in front of the boulder. He did not follow them forward. Wild Dog Taoist. Wild Dog Taoist stared at Yin Leader, panting heavily, but he still loudly said, "Boss, at that time when you lured me in a Blood Forger hall, we made a solemn vow together in front of Founder Blackheart's statue. This life will never change you. How can you be like this?" An ashamed look flashed past Yin Leader's face. He lowered his head and quietly said, "Wild Dog, the situation is stronger than you. Don't seek your own death. Quickly come over." Wild Dog Taoist was surrounded by countless pairs of eyes, especially that pair of indistinctly glowing red eyes. It was as if it pierced into his heart, made all the hairs on his body stand up. Even both of his legs, because of the extreme fear, could not help but tremble slightly. Just that in his trembling, he slowly shook his head. "No, boss, no, whatever you want me to do, but to want me to rebel against Blood Forger Hall, no." He looked ahead, at a loss and emptiness, as if everything was destroyed, quietly said, "I was like a monster since young. Everyone despised me. Even my biological parents also abandoned me. I was brought up by Wild Dog, suffered all kinds of hardships and humiliation. Only after entering Blood Forger Hall, then it was my turn to bully others, to hold my head high. At that time, I made a solemn vow in front of the Founder that in this life I will definitely follow Blood Forger Hall. Even if I die, I will not regret." Everyone was stunned. Yin Leader noticed that Ghost Lee's face gradually darkened. His heart was anxious. He did not expect that this wild dog who usually bullied the weak and feared the strong, greedy for life and afraid of death, now suddenly became like this. But he could not, just because of this wild dog alone, disregard his own life. He hardened his heart and said, "Good, you are great. Then you alone will support Blood Forger Hall." Speaking, he threw the Black Heart token in his hand over. Wild Dog subconsciously caught it, but then his body trembled violently, panting heavily. Yin Leader and the rest all disappeared into the Ghost King Sect's black-attired man, leaving Wild Dog alone standing under the huge rock which was emitting light, facing the innumerable black-attired men. And standing not far in front of him was the legendary bloodthirsty and murderous demon. The indistinct and ferocious gaze landed on Wild Dog's face. Wild Dog felt that he had almost seen an evil spirit. If not for the huge rock behind him supporting him, he really did not know if he could still stand. Just that, in this extreme fear, he quietly used a trembling voice and said, "Just kill me." Speaking, he held the Black Heart token tightly in his hand, closed his eyes. The ice-cold metal token seemed to dissolve into his body, waiting together for the arrival of destruction and death. Chapter 162. The surroundings were quiet and soundless, as if reverberating beside his ears was only his own intense heartbeat. The unknown fear of death, like the endless cold sea, drowned Wild Dog. He involuntarily trembled. Countless pairs of eyes stared at this figure, very pitiful and lonely, just that he surprisingly persevered, his trembling hands still clutching that Black Heart token, still very, very tightly. This look suddenly seemed somewhat familiar, as if many years ago, that stubborn and persevering young man had an inexplicable perseverance. The red light in his eyes slowly faded. His arms silently waved in the darkness. Immediately, the innumerable black-attired men like tide surged outwards. In a blink of an eye disappeared completely. Wild Dog's panting slowly calmed down. He felt strange but was still afraid. He slowly opened a slit of his eyes, only to see this place, unknowingly since when, there were only two people left, including him. The bloody stench that pervaded the air also unknowingly disappeared. That person, with his back facing him, stood in front of Forsaken Abyss, silently gazing down, as if in that world's deepest darkness there were his past memories. A breeze gently blew over. The human's tiny body contrasted against this huge Forsaken Abyss, looked very fragile. Wild Dog suddenly had a thought. While there was no one now, he should push him down like this. Once this thought appeared, it immediately lingered in his mind like a fire. It burned his entire body, and he couldn't help but want to try it. However, his mind was in a frenzy, but his body seemed to resist his will and remained motionless. Until that person turned around, looked at him. Wild Dog only felt a basin of cold water pouring down from his head to the soles of his feet. "Just now did you want to push me down from here?" he indifferently said, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. "Dang!" The black heart token slipped from Wild Dog's hand, dropped onto the ground. Wild Dog hurriedly picked it up. His face also turned pale, but then he straightened his body, as if to boost his courage, loudly said, "If you want to kill, then kill me. I am not afraid of you." This man, who was addressed as Ghostly, indifferently looked at him and said, "I will not kill you. If you die, Bloodforger Hall will really have no descendants. Most likely Elder Blackheart will also die with remaining grievances." He walked forward, passed by Wild Dog, and continued, "In the future, you will follow me." Wild Dog was stunned for a moment, and then loudly said, "You brought people and almost annihilated our Bloodforger Hall, and you still want me to follow you?" Ghostly ignored him, only walked forward, but his voice was still clearly heard. "Your skills are too low, and if it wasn't for me, Ghost King's sect would kill you first. Even your fellow sect members who surrendered, like Nien Leader and the rest, seeing that you insist on joining Bloodforger Hall, wouldn't it seem that they are too shameless? They would also want to kill you." Wild Dog was speechless. Beads of perspiration formed on his forehead, but he saw that person's figure gradually submerged into the darkness, walking further and further away. Finally, he stamped his feet and ran with quick steps to catch up. His mouth loudly said, "Humph, I am not afraid of death, but in order to revive Bloodforger Hall, I have to suffer myself." In the darkness, the sound of footsteps, one in front and one behind, walked in the Cave of Fangs. Suddenly, as if they thought of something, the person behind said, "Hey, Shah Danon, why are you doing this to me?" His voice suddenly vanished. In the depths of the darkness, there seemed to be a roar of a demonic beast, and a thick stench of blood immediately surrounded them. Wild Dog shuddered. After a while, the stench slowly faded. The person in front was silent for a long time in the darkness, then lightly said, "This name I've already forgotten for many years." Wild Dog let out a long sigh, but could not help but ask again, "Then what should I call you in the future?" There was no answer. That person walked forward again. Wild Dog mumbled a few words, not sure if he was cursing, but he still followed. In front of them, it was still endless darkness. Mount Qingyun, this mystical and mysterious celestial mountain in the eyes of the common people, 10 years later, it was still like a paradise on earth. The destruction caused by the battle between the righteous and demonic paths had already been repaired. However, it was unknown whether the wound left in the depths of his heart had also healed. In the battle 10 years ago, the head of Sunrise Peak, Shang Zhengliang, head of Sunset Peak, Taoist Tianyun, unfortunately passed away. The head of Dragon Head Peak, Taoist Vasp Kalo, betrayed the sect. Except for Master Doyle Shan, half of the 6 heads were gone. Now, the head positions of Sunrise Peak and Sunset Peak were already taken over by the elders of the faction. Only Dragon Head Peak, because of Taoist Vaskalo, the second largest branch next to the main house, could not raise its head in Jadian. After the internal election, unexpectedly, the head position was taken over by the younger generation Kevern. And as if it was a trend, in Qingyun's sect, various big factions, the opportunities for the younger generation was increasing, like Peak of the Wind Zhang Shushu, Big Bamboo Valley Songdarren, Small Bamboo Valley Wenmin, Lu Sweki. All of them were already doing more and more things for their teachers. Even the main house, these years, Master Doyle Shun also gradually did not care about the secular world, and let his favorite disciple, Xiao Yikai, handle the daily matters. Back of Peak of Widows, Founder's Ancestral Hall. The gentle sunlight shone on the majestic hall, making it look solemn and mysterious. The hall still looked gloomy. Those everlasting lanterns and the faint light from the joss sticks and candles were still paying tribute to the souls of Jadian's countless ancestors. Lin Jingyu, in the empty space in front of Founder's Ancestral Hall, alone, sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. The dragon slayer's sword, emitting dark green light, gently floated above his head, emitting a green halo that enveloped him. Under the sunlight, it flashed with mysterious light. His face no longer had the naivety from before, more perseverance and vicissitudes of life. Behind him, deep in the shadows of Founder's ancestral hall, two pairs of eyes quietly staring at him. After a long while, a figure slowly walked out. It was that mysterious old man with a face full of wrinkles. He unhurriedly walked out of the shadows, sat down on the steps of Founder's ancestral hall. His eyes stopped on Lin Jingyu. After a long time, he indifferently said, "That's enough." Dragon Slayer Sword's dark green light retracted. Lin Jingyu breathed deeply, opened his eyes, stood up, turned his head and looked at the old man, revealing a smile, said, "Senior." The old man looked at his young face. A trace of smile on his lips, said, "Your aptitude is really very good, and you are so hard-working, your advancement is far better than what I expected." A look of gratitude flashed past Lin Jingyu's face. He bowed deeply, quietly said, "Senior's great benevolence, disciple will never forget." The old man gently waved his hand, turned and sighed. In a blink, another 10 years have passed. I have nothing more to teach you, and you have also accompanied me in this Founder's ancestral hall for 10 years. Today, you can go back. Lin Jingyu's body shook, revealed a stunned look. That old man ignored him, only said, "What happened in Longsho Valley? You know about it." Lin Jingyu regained his senses, nodded and said, "Yes, a few days ago, Keheo's senior brother came to visit me and told me some of it." The old man nodded and said, "Today I heard that the new generation of outstanding disciples in Qingyun's sect are all gathered at Tongtian Peak. There might be something. Just now, the head also sent a message over. You should go too." The corner of Lin Jingyu's mouth twitched, looked at the old man, indistinctly had a reluctance to part. That old man smiled. A faint sadness seemed to appear on his face, but immediately disappeared, waved his hand and said, "A great man. No need to make such an attitude. Go." Lin Jingyu inhaled deeply, bowed to the ground, said, "Senior, this 10 years of teaching grace, towering like a mountain, disciple will never forget it. In the future, I will definitely use what I have learned to uphold justice and exterminate the evil, to repay the sect, and not let down my life's ambition." The old man smiled and nodded, said, "All right, you can go." Lin Jingyu bowed again, looked at the surrounding scenery, finally abruptly turned, straightened his body, strode forward, left this Founder's ancestral hall. The sunlight shone on his back, as if it was dazzling. The old man looked at his figure, lost in thought, not knowing when, behind him, another figure appeared. "He has left," that figure indifferently said. The old man's mouth twitched, slowly stood up, turned his head and looked at this person, this supreme sect head in Qingyun's sect. "Many thanks," he suddenly said. Reverend Daoxian seemed to be slightly surprised, frowned and said, "What?" The old man passed through his body, walked towards the Founder's ancestral hall, said, "Many thanks for agreeing to let this young man accompany me for 10 years." Reverend Daoxian was silent for a moment, also slowly walked into the Founder's ancestral hall. In the middle of the great hall, in front of the altar where countless Qin Yun ancestors and seniors' memorial tablets were enshrined, candles and candles, flickering, illuminating the people's faces. The old man walked to the front of the altar and picked up a brand new incense stick from the incense burner table in front of the altar. He lit another incense stick and replaced the one that was about to burn out. Reverend Daoxian quietly watched his slow and practiced movements, suddenly said, "That year I took a huge risk, hid it from the various teachers and saved you, but you did not even say a word of thanks. Why is it that today, a young man, you are thanking me instead?" That old man did not speak, stepped back, his body in the shadows, still holding the candle that he had just replaced. He raised his head, gazed upwards, the memorial tablets of Qin Yun's sect's generations of ancestors, majestically towering before him, sacred and solemn, like a mountain's imposing manner, as if it could easily crush him, this insignificant person. Chapter 163. He was silent, did not speak, only staring. Reverend Daoxian was behind him, could not see the old man's eyes, but he could see the scorching oil dripping from the candle, drop by drop, landed on that withered palm, and then slowly solidified. That palm also seemed to be trembling slightly. Deep in the shadows, far away, a faint sigh seemed to be heard. When Lin Jingyu reached Tongtian Peak Crystal Hall, there were already more than 10 people standing there. Among these people, some were familiar to him, some were so unfamiliar that he had only seen them a few times, only knew that they were from the same sect. But without exception, everyone present knew the young people standing there right now were all Qing Yun's sect's young generation's outstanding talents. And among the crowd, the most outstanding were only two. One was naturally the cold and elegant Anan. The other was now dressed in a leader's attire, with an extraordinary bearing, Keheo. Speaking of which, the other branch's leaders had not come. Keheo was also the only one of the 6 leaders present. Keheo turned and saw Lin Jingyu walking in, was stunned for a moment, and then laughed and walked up, hugged Lin Jingyu, assessed him from head to toe, smiled and said, "Lin Junior brother, aren't you guarding the coffin in Founder's Ancestral Hall? Why are you here?" In these 10 years, Lin Jingyu had always used the excuse of guarding the coffin to stay in Founder's Ancestral Hall, and that mysterious old man was related to Qing Yun's sect's past secrets, so everyone did not know. Right now he naturally would not say anything, only smiled and said, "10 years is up, I also came out. Someone just happened to inform me to come here. Didn't expect Chi's senior brother to also be here." Keheo smiled and said, "Sect head teacher uncle informed the outstanding disciple from each branch to come here. Said there's something important to discuss. I happen to have nothing to do, so came over to take a look." While they were talking, a man walked over from the side, tall and big. It was Big Bamboo Valley head disciple Xavion. 10 years had passed. His appearance did not change much. Back then, Xavion was considered familiar with Keheo and the rest. Right now, he walked over to exchange greetings. A moment later, his eyes landed on Lin Jingyu, smiled, and said, "Lin Junior brother not seen for a few years. You are even more handsome and tall. Your skills must have improved a lot." Lin Jingyu slightly lowered his head, smiled, and said, "Xavion senior brother, you flatter me." Lin Jingyu slightly lowered his head, smiled, and said, "Ah, Chi senior brother, do you still recognize junior brother?" Keheo looked at the person who spoke, smiled, and said, "Tseng junior brother, I can't forget anyone, but I dare not forget you." The person who came was Return of Wind Valley Young Generation's most outstanding disciple Issa Shu, and beside him, 2 beauties from Small Bamboo Valley, Wenmin and Lu. Originally, the treasure that fell from the sky, only the virtuous can have it. We were not interested. But after this news spread, we heard that the evil sect evildoers were marching in the west, intending to get their hands on it. What? Damn it! The Qing Yun sect's young disciples were immediately enraged. One after another shouted out. Xiao Yikai waited for the crowd to quiet down, smiled, and said, "If this news is fake, then it's fine. But if there really is a rare treasure falling into the hands of the evil sect, won't we be helping the evildoers?" Qing Yun sect has always been the world's good faction leader. Therefore, sect head Reverend has decided to select the most outstanding disciples from our sect's younger generation to go together to the Western Great Marsh, uphold the righteous way, slay the evil. Speaking till here, he paused for a while, suddenly with a mysterious tone, said, "Fellow junior brothers, there is another important matter. Heard that today, Tianyin Temple and Funxiang Valley have also sent their disciples to the Western Great Marsh. Ever since that big battle 10 years ago, everyone is also clear these 2 sects are on good terms with us on the surface, but secretly they have been eyeing the good faction leader position for a long time. I hope everyone will not lose our sect's face." There was an uproar in the crowd. Immediately someone shouted out, "Sect head Reverend, don't worry. We will definitely not lose Qing Yun's sect's face." Exactly. This time we must let the evil sect and Tianyin Temple, Funxiang Valley see our prowess. Reverend Daoxian smiled and nodded, stood up and said, "This time going to the west, there may be dangers. The evil sect people are even more treacherous and cunning. All of you will have to worry." The crowd replied in unison, "Yes." Reverend Daoxian said to Xiao Yikai, "Then you make the arrangements, leave early." After speaking, his eyes intentionally or unintentionally glanced at Bei, who was standing in the crowd, then turned and walked towards the inner hall. The crowd respectfully sent him off, waiting until his figure disappeared. Xiao Yikai then turned back to divide the people. On the other side, Bei said to Kaheo, "Why? Chi's senior brother, this time you are not going?" Kaheo laughed in spite of himself. "Lin junior brother, now I can't leave." Bei came to his senses, his face blushed, and said, "Ah, senior brother, you are already our branch head. I did not expect that." Kaheo patted his shoulder, smiled, and said, "This is your first time traveling the world. It is a great opportunity. I am looking forward to you showing your prowess. Make a name for yourself." Kaheo laughed. "Senior brother, you are joking." Kaheo laughed, but then his face turned gloomy. Seeing there was no one around, he quietly said to Bei, "Lin junior brother, to tell you the truth, 10 years ago, teacher, Taoist Song's song betrayed Qing Yun. The result made our Longsho Valley unable to raise our heads, especially Rising Sun Valley, Sunset Valley disciples. When they see us, they treat us like enemies. Senior brother, as a head, it is also very hard, so I really hope that this time you will go out to help our Longsho Valley, to fight for our pride." Kaheo was silent. After a moment nodded slightly, quietly said, "Chi senior brother, I know, don't worry, I will definitely not let you down." Kaheo smiled. His face also relaxed a little, stretched out his hand, and patted Kaheo's shoulder. Just at this moment, Xavion walked over, glanced at the two of them, smiled. "Why, this time Longsho Valley is Lin junior brother going out." Kaheo smiled. "Yes, I wonder who is going from Big Bamboo Valley." Xavion laughed. "Originally it was me, this good-for-nothing big senior brother going. Then my teacher's wife thought I was stupid, so she let my 6th junior brother, Amanla junior brother, go." Kaheo smiled. "Amanla junior brother has always been clever. With him, our Qin Yun sect is like a tiger with wings." Xavion naturally was not as eloquent as Kaheo. After a few words, he was about to leave, suddenly turned back and said to Kaheo, "All right, Chi senior brother, my teacher's wife recently missed my Ling Air junior sister. After you go back, ask her to go back to Big Bamboo Valley. Stay for a few days." Kaheo smiled. "Xavion senior brother, you still don't know. This morning, before I left Longsho Valley to come here, Ling Air had already returned to Big Bamboo Valley. Said she missed her mother. It seems that mother-in-law and her are truly mother and daughter who share a mutual affinity." Xavion was stunned for a moment, then laughed loudly. His hearty voice reverberated in this crystal hall. Chapter 164. Mount Jade and Bamboo Peak. The clouds drifted between the mountains, like a gentle white ribbon, gently changing. The slightly moist air in the morning and the fresh and cool wind passed through the green bamboo forest, brushed past the bamboo peak. With the observed silence hall as the center of the building, it stood quietly in the morning light. Everything seemed so tranquil. Only a burst of barking sound, mixed with zhizhi sound, broke the silence here. Big Yellow with bright fur sprinted from afar, Ash riding on its back, using its hand to hold onto the fur on Big Yellow's neck to support its body. At the same time, the other hand waved in the air, looking very excited. 10 years ago, after Shah Danon went to Peak of Widows, he never came back. At the beginning, the two animals became depressed, especially Ash. Contrary to its usual energetic nature, it was depressed for a long time. As for Big Yellow, it was also not good. It was depressed all day, not knowing if it was because it liked Shah Danon's cooking too much. During that time, every time Amanla, who was cooking for Shah Danon, took out food to feed them, Big Yellow and Ash would roar at it. After eating, they would roll their eyes, looking very dissatisfied. Poor Amanla was also depressed for a long time. Just that time was like water, leisurely passing by. The memories of the past also seemed to gradually fade. Not knowing when it started, Xiao Hui and Huang once again started to play on Big Bamboo Valley, playing endlessly. Just that even so, when they were deep in the night, they would always return to Zhang Xiaofan's room, as if anticipating something. Although for so many years, This room was always empty. See, De Huang suddenly stopped in its tracks. The huge inertia almost made Xiao Hui fall off its back. Luckily, it held on tightly enough and managed to stabilize its body. Big Yellow barked loudly, suddenly turned its head, opened its mouth, and stuck out its long tongue. Chasing its own tail, its body kept spinning at the same place. Xiao Hui sat steadily on its back, grinned and laughed loudly, looking very excited and happy. De Huang had played this boring game countless times, but to them, it was the most fun thing. The faint morning light shone on their bodies. Big Bamboo Valley reverberated with the sounds of the two animals. The people were still asleep. This wonderful time seemed to be left only for them. In the distance, in the verdant bamboo forest at the back of the mountain, the rustling sound of the bamboo leaves could be heard faintly. Even the wind blowing from that direction seemed to carry the fragrance of the bamboo leaves and the scent of the bamboo forest. Suddenly, De Huang stopped chasing its own tail. Xiao Hui on its back also raised its head almost at the same time, opened its mouth, and looked towards that stretch of bamboo forest. Green mountains, green bamboos, wind blowing like the sea, rustle, rustle, rustle. Gigi. Xiao Hui suddenly shrieked. De Huang's reaction was also strange, just that its voice was much softer, barked a few times, but after a moment, the two animals seemed to know something. Xiao Hui grabbed tightly onto De Huang. De Huang immediately spread its forelegs and swiftly ran towards that stretch of black bamboo forest at the back of the mountain. On the familiar small path at the back of the mountain. Maybe because no one had come here to do their homework for a long time, the vegetation was so lush that even the original path was becoming blurred, but De Huang seemed to have an innate spiritual sense, shuttled through the forest, ran faster and faster. Very soon it reached that stretch of bamboo forest. In a verdant bamboo forest, serene and with a trace of mystery, De Huang stopped outside the bamboo forest, quietly called out a few times. Xiao Hui jumped down from its back, crouched beside, looked at it, and then peered into the depths of the bamboo forest, at times using its hands to scratch its head, seemed to be hesitating. But after a while, Xiao Hui finally made up its mind. It called out to De Huang twice and led the way into the bamboo forest. To say walk was actually not quite right, but Xiao Hui strangely did not climb up the bamboos, instead using its forelimbs to support on the ground. With a hopping posture, slowly walked in, looking at it. It was careful, but also seemed to be full of anticipation. De Huang called out twice, also strided forward and followed behind it into this bamboo forest. One monkey and one dog slowly shuttled through the serene bamboo forest. Very soon their figures disappeared. The morning light was blocked by the dense bamboo leaves, but through the gaps, there were still rays of light, turned into finger-sized light pillars, spilled down from the top of the bamboo forest, landed on the ground. Xiao Hui and De Huang walked slowly in the bamboo forest, walked. Unknowingly, they had reached a certain place deep in the bamboo forest. There was a small clearing. It looked familiar in the vague memory. It seemed to be the place where Shah Danan first came here, painstakingly chopping bamboo. Xiao Hui stopped, crouched on the clearing, used its hands to scratch its head, looked around. In the serene bamboo forest, it was silent, but there seemed to be some kind of inexplicable aura floating here, making the heartbeat slowly quicken. Pooh! A light footstep stepped in the silence of the bamboo forest. Xiao Hui and De Huang turned at the same time. That figure, behind a thick bamboo, slowly appeared. The bamboo forest suddenly quietened down again, but after a moment, suddenly cheers sounded. Xiao Hui jumped up. Its body turned into a gray light, dashed over, jumped into the air, leapt into that person's embrace. It tightly grabbed onto that person's clothes, laughed loudly, unrestrainedly releasing its joy. She laughed incessantly. That person hugged over. The once ferocious aura was now nowhere to be seen. Between his brows was a gentle smile that had not been seen for a long time, holding Xiao Hui in his arms. Ouyang Ming suddenly felt something again after a brief moment, so he lowered his head to look and smiled. He bent down to stroke Big Yellow's head, which was rubbing against his body, and asked with a smile, "Big Yellow, are you all right?" De Huang naturally could not speak, only quietly whimpered. Its tail kept wagging, using its head to gently rub against his palm. At the corner of his eyes, at a place where no one could see, indistinctly reflected light. Only all of you still treat me like before. He softly sighed, took a deep breath in this bamboo forest, the once familiar taste of longing. Hua hua. Suddenly, another flurry of footsteps was heard. It was Wild Dog Taoist scurrying out from behind, but looking at his old and tattered robe torn by the thorns, he knew he had gone the wrong way. Wild Dog Taoist's face was full of misfortune, grumbled to the once Zhang Xiao fan, now ghostly, "Hey brat, are you crazy? Even if you want to die, you don't have to do this. This is Qing Yun's sect. If we are discovered, even if we have 10 lives, we will still be dead." Suddenly, De Huang, who was very docile to ghostly, just now turned around. The hair on its neck stood up, bared its teeth. Obviously, it did not like Wild Dog at all. After a moment, De Huang howled and actually pounced over. Wild Dog was shocked, but seeing this almost half a human-tall, enormous dog suddenly pouncing over, his heart first thumped, subconsciously reached out to hold his Fong Esper. Unexpectedly, Ghost, Li indifferently said, "If you dare to use your Esper to hurt this dog, I will chop off your hands and feet, and then throw it down the mountain in front of Observe Silence Hall." Wild Dog was stunned, angrily said, "What did you say?" But before he could finish, De Huang had already pounced over in Wild Dog's absent-minded moment. He was pounced on by this enormous dog. Immediately, dog barks and curses were heard incessantly. Human and dog tumbled, staggered, in a mess. Wild Dog Taoist and De Huang rolled behind a distant thorns. The human figure and dog body could not be seen. Only angry cries could be heard from time to time. Dead dog, you are still biting? Hey brat, you brat, still not telling this dog to let go. No, let go, ah. Damn dog, that is a human leg, not a chicken leg. Damn dog, that is a human leg, not a chicken leg. Quickly let go, don't bite a. Ghostly turned a deaf ear to Wild Dog's cries, turned his head to look at Xiao Hui in his arms. A smile between his brows, carefully assessed it. After not seeing it for 10 years, Xiao Hui seemed to have grown a little. The feeling of carrying it in his arms seemed to be heavier than before. Even that mark between its eyes seemed to have grown a lot bigger. And Xiao Hui, after the initial joy and agitation, right now was still grinning, like in the past, climbed onto his shoulder, habitually stretched out its hand to stroke his hair. Ghostly quietly stood and then slowly walked out, walked to the edge of the bamboo forest, gazed afar. The place in front of the mountain covered by clouds and mist was once his warmest home. He was in a daze, gazing deeply. Not knowing how much time had passed, De Huang triumphantly ran out from the depths of the bamboo forest, shaking its head, tail wagging nonstop, hopped to Ghostly. Woof, 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 called out a few times. Ghostly smiled, stretched out his hand, and patted its head. After a while, Wild Dog Taoist staggered out from the black bamboo forest, the Taoist robe on his body more tattered. Even his dog face had a few more scratches. As for the wound on his feet, it was even more indistinctly visible. Right now, seeing De Huang crouching beside Ghostly, he felt afraid and did not dare to walk over, scolded angrily from afar. "Dead dog, don't think that there is someone backing you up. Sooner or later one day, I will kill you." De Huang abruptly turned its head, roared at Wild Dog Taoist. Wild Dog was scared out of his wits, immediately retreated a few steps, but De Huang looked like it was only scaring him, did not pursue, and instead turned its head. Wild Dog was then relieved, but no matter what, he did not dare to scold again. Looking down the mountain for a long time, the first ray of sunlight of the day had already quietly descended, covering this stretch of green mountain with a layer of faint golden clothes. Ghostly closed his eyes, breathed deeply. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.